guess we do have a public hearing first, about the finance workshop.
Saying that all of this was very, I got that about 4 to 10.
Did you need an assistant for your
The time is 6 p.m. We're going to begin this meeting by standing for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We will begin the meeting at 1:01, our public hearing for the Neil Armstrong HVAC system replacement. Close the public hearing for the HVAC replacement. And before we make the motion for 3.01, I do want to remind everybody that if you are going to come to the podium to speak for public comment, so please make sure that you grab one of the sheets in the back and fill out the information and present it to either Celeste or Colleen, please. All right, do I have a motion for 3.01?
I would like to move that we approve the agenda with one change, that we table 6.05 to our next regular meeting.
I will second that motion.
Okay, roll call, please.
Director Castro.
Yes.
Director Champion.
Yes.
Director Dorder. Director Eastman.
Yes.
Director Lynch.
Yes.
Director Peters.
No discussion, I'm just wondering why.
I think Dr. Morse will address that in her remarks. Some things were not quite right and needed to get fixed.
Okay. Aye.
Director Smithson.
Yes.
Motion carried 601.
All right, thank you. Brings us to 4.01, our cell and web crew presentation. Dr. Morse, did you want to make some comments before they begin?
I would love to. So, super excited and to have students from our middle school, students from our high school, and staff from middle school and high school who have helped us kick off this very important work this year. If you remember, the year, spring of 20, Teresa Frecking, our former student success coach, had written a grant with a team of people, some of whom are in the room this evening. And we were one of 8 districts in the country that received a $25,000 grant for some seed money to start what is now we refer to as Cell Crew, Web Crew, programming to create welcoming and inclusive environments for incoming freshmen at the high school and incoming 6th graders at the middle school, where you use peer leaders to support the work along with staff advisors. And I'm sure I've butchered that explanation, and they'll do a better job a little bit later. But I don't want to take their thunder. But we had an extremely successful start this fall at both middle school and high school with this work. There was a lot of hours that went into it last year. Staff went off for a pretty intensive training in April of last year, and have continued with some training this fall. And then they recruited students to be both web leaders. Those are 8th graders at the middle school, and then at the high school, cell crew leaders who are juniors and seniors, and they engaged in training over the summer so that we were ready to go. So tonight they are here to present and give you highlights about the successful start to the year. And when you look at that picture, I think it just says it all. At the middle school, we've got Rachel Dierks and Landon Fry. I swear I saw Landon. Oh, there you are behind the podium. Sorry, I'm too short to see you. And then from the high school, our advisors are Christina Zimmerman, Laura Lee Cole, and Shelley Hilton Cullum. So I'm super excited for them to be here tonight and to take you through their journey.
Everyone, we're gonna all come up together because it's a little bit about togetherness. I'm Shelley Hilton Cullum. I'm the social worker at the high school, and I've been involved with cell crew at the high school since we wrote the grant, so from the beginning. And so I'm just gonna do a brief introduction about the program. WEB stands for Where Everybody Belongs, and that's our middle school program. And cell crew stands for Social Emotional Learning Leaders, and that's our high school program here. Okay, so what are these programs? They are a year-long transition program to help transition our 8th graders to 9th graders and to help transition our 5th graders into 6th graders. It is peer-led and culminates in a freshman orientation and a 6th grade orientation on the first day that is high energy and full of excitement that they'll tell you a little bit more about it. This program's reach, has been used in almost 6,000 schools. They have trained, that training that Dr. Morse talked about, they've trained almost 20,000 staff with that. More than 20 million students impacted. 2.7 this year alone are being impacted by this program. And through our orientation and our leadership training in both buildings, this program alone this year has impacted 884 students who've been involved in the program. The impact on climate culture and connection to PBIS. So PBIS focuses so much on just building a really positive climate in our schools, and this does that. It fits perfectly with our goals for PBIS. We have peer leaders. They are trained on leadership, and their goal is to really just bond with the students that are in their small groups and help them feel welcome and that they belong on the very first day of school. It's leadership development. These students volunteered their time over the summer to come in for between 8 and 10 hours or more even to be trained in leadership development, to learn how to be positive role models, to continue to be positive role models because they already were, to be motivators and teachers to our new students. And common expectations, our leaders use the same language that we use in the buildings with PBIS to teach common expectations and give guidance in a very powerful format. Students like to learn from each other sometimes rather than listening to the adults in the room talk about how things work in our building. And now I'm going to turn it over to who's next? Coordinator training. There you go.
Like Dr. Moore said, by the way, I'm Rachel Dierks from the middle school, and like Dr. Moore said, our coordinator training in the spring was very intensive. I don't think any of us quite understood how intensive it was going to be until we got there. It was a 3-day training. The first day ran us through as though we were the 6th graders or the 9th graders. The second day, and we went through it as though we were the 8th graders or the juniors and seniors. And then the third day, they taught us how to train our leaders. So these were almost 12-hour days. But when we left, we had all the information we needed as coordinators to run cell or web, and we were certified program coordinators. And I think one very important part, we went with the idea, we're going to figure out how to do this, and we're going to decide if we're going to implement it next year or the following year, because it was so late in the spring when we went. And our takeaway, I think I was in Mr. Hartley's office within the first hour of the following day saying, we can't wait. We got to do this. This is an awesome program. We cannot afford to wait to implement it. So we hit the ground running from there, and it was a crazy spring for all of us trying to get this ball rolling.
So part of the ball was getting the ball rolling was the leader recruitment. And so what we did was we had an in-service meeting before school with our staff and started with a team building activity. And we really wanted to drive home the fact that this program was meant to kind of take some things off the teacher's plate. We really wanted to empower our students to develop those relationships and leadership skills with our student body. So after the team building activity, we then kind of gave a description of what we really wanted our cell leaders to look like. And we wanted them to represent everybody in the high school. We really weren't targeting that 10% of the population that does everything. In fact, it's not that we wanted to avoid that, but we really wanted to make sure that we had athletes, musicians, students who really weren't involved in anything. We didn't even need to have the best of the best students. We wanted students that our freshmen could say, yeah, I'm a lot like him. And so we gave that description to our teachers. They nominated, I don't remember how many nominations we had, tons of nominations. 450? Or 150, sorry, that's just juniors and seniors. I'm like, wow, that was a lot. No idea. No, and then they brought them in for small groups, and we shared what our goal and our missions were for Cell Crew, and then gave them applications, and they applied. And then we kind of went through a little selection process, and then we invited them to our May Development Day. And our spring development day, depending on the program. And so this is where we took 2 hours of the school day and invited these potential leaders to this development day. And we simulated what they would be doing with their freshmen on the first day of school, similar to the training that we went through as well. And so we're going to do one of the activities with you today. It's a team building activity. It's called Count Off. And it sounds like a really easy task. You're going to count 1 through 20 as a, right here, you guys right here in the circle, you're going to count 1 through 20. But there's some rules. Rule number 1 is that you can't go in order. So you can't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can't do that, okay? You also can't indicate who's going to go next. You with me so far? Okay. You got to go, and give me the look, Dr. Beavich. You also, you have, everybody has to say at least one number. Nobody can say more than 3, all right? And if two people say the same number at the same time, you have to go back to number 1. Got it?
There's no pressure.
No pressure whatsoever. And since we, as cell crew leaders, we always will do the same thing that our students would do, I will start us out. You ready? Ready. Okay. 1.
3.
Oh, stop. You have to go in order. I know, I forgot the rule.
You didn't go in order.
You have to go forward. You get in a circle, but you can't go I see what you did. You have to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Understanding he did.
I'm so sorry. Well, you know what? My bad. I failed math. You have to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You just can't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can't go around the circle like that. Does that make sense now?
No.
Oh my God.
Yes, it does.
For us to sort of skip
Hey,
jump around.
hey, you can't volunteer first.
Why
Just watch the
can't I
rest
go
of us
next?
play.
Why can't I go next?
We need a
Can go
2.
next.
We need a 2
You just
first.
need to say
You gotta go
2.
1. I go 1, and then somebody else says 2. Then somebody else says 3.
Oh, you have to go in
4.
numerical.
We have to go in numerical order.
We have to count
I
1
didn't
through
know that. I
20.
didn't know that. Okay.
The first rule is you have to count 1 through 20.
But-
All right, ready? 1.
2.
3.
4.
Oh, now we have to start
Start
over.
over.
Yeah, it's okay.
We're never
Okay. Well, we're modeling. We're modeling. 1.
2.
1.
3. Oh, 2.
Yeah, all right. Okay, ready? 1.
2. 3.
4.
5. 6.
6.
All right, I'm gonna throw a little bone at you. Ready? 1, 2.
3.
4, 5, 6. 7, 8, 9. 10, 11, 12.
13, 14, 15.
16, 17, 18, 19.
So close.
All right, so for the sake of not having to waste everybody's time tonight, we're gonna pretend that that was not done, and then somebody's gonna say,
20.
"Thank you." All right, very good. Nice job, team. Okay, so that's one of the activities that we did with our students to kind of help build, leadership. I mean, not leadership, cohesion in our group. Yes,
Did
sir.
they have as much trouble as we did?
Yes.
No.
Make you feel better.
No, it's not. No, it's No, yes, it does. But that's part of the fun, right? Is that and then finally you kind of figure out the dynamics of your group, and then you accomplish your first goal together. So that was countdown. All right. And next, I think I've got one more. Is that it? No, I think and then this is one of the examples of one of our other activities we did with students, because really the program is also about having fun. So this is called Partner Tag.
Let's see if it'll play.
It plays if you go out of presentation mode.
Oh.
Oh, okay. Well, that's
It's okay, just hit escape. Celeste, there you go. Or it did for me, it played. There it goes.
So they had to tag their partner and then turn around in a circle before they had to go find their partner again and tag them. So, all right, that's it. Okay.
The board should do that.
All right.
What was the why? Are you going to speak to? Can you go back to the previous slide, please?
Oh.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
So
You have to start over now.
for the middle school, we were really challenged trying to find a place where we could have all 60 of our leaders in one location at school. So the Bettendorf YMCA donated their space on our spring play day. So we went there to host our spring play day.
All right, so that was already a lot of information, and as it probably sounded, a lot of work from our coordinators and a little bit from our leaders. But I would say that this day right here, 7/1/22, is when the real work began. Not that the other work wasn't real, but to me, this is where the final countdown starts. So this day, the back half of summer, is when the coordinators started getting together and planning out our leader training and the kickoff that first day of school for our 6th graders and freshmen. So we have 53 days at this point. And this is kind of what we were doing during that back half of summer as web and cell coordinators, organizing teacher volunteers. We did have other teachers volunteering and assisting us with the organization, figuring out how to schedule all of this for the first day of school for our leader training, making sure we were designing all the printable stuff we needed and getting donations, and all of that work was pretty much our summer for the last half or so. And that all led to the first most important day of our summer, which was actually training our leaders, which Rachel will tell you a little bit.
Okay, so this is where our leaders really came to shine. They gave up 8 to 10 hours of their summer in August. And this wasn't just middle of their summer. These were their last days of summer where they could have been soaking up summer. But they chose to come into school and get trained on how to be a leader. So that in itself tells you how great these kids are that they were willing to do that. During this time, they learned leadership skills. They practiced, kind of like what I said, how we were trained. They practiced as though they were the incoming students. Then they practiced as though they were themselves. And then we also, they made phone calls. We called almost every single incoming student, 6th grade and freshmen. And so that right there was pretty impressive that they made those phone calls and they just welcomed them to our orientation on the first day of school. So from the get-go, those new students were coming in knowing that they were welcomed, and we were excited to have them. So we are going to turn it over to some of our leaders right now who will speak to this.
Hello, my name is Caleb Brown, and I'm just going to talk about my experience with the first couple days of when we got to meet our web leaders and my partner. Like, some of the first days were good for me to connect with my partner and get to know her well. We got to go over some of the games and that we're going to be doing with the 6th graders, and we had groups that we did it in. We were struggling with it, so it was kind of impressive. Like on the first day when the 6th graders, they did it like some of things better than us, which was pretty impressive. But overall, it was just like a very good couple days to experience it and just to get more closer to our web leaders. And now we have a high school leader.
As cell crew leaders, our goal was to make the freshmen feel as if high school wasn't as scary as they thought they were.
Could you introduce yourself?
Oh yes, I'm Peyton. I'm one of the cell crew leaders at the high school. And like I was saying, the freshmen always think that high school is so scary and intimidating, and our goal was to make it seem as if it was an inclusive place as it is, and make it fun for them on the first day. And we spent over 10 hours, our last days of summer, like they were saying, learning all the things that the freshmen were going to be doing and the new students coming from outside of the district. And they hammered these games into us. We played them over and over and over again and learned the rules back and forth. We had this thick packet that we had, and it was just crazy. But it was a really good time. I got to meet people from the high school that I didn't even know. And we got assigned our partners for the day. And it was just so much fun getting to be able to be part of that experience, knowing that you were going to make a difference when the freshmen came. Even though training was long and hard, it paid off in the end, and it was really successful, and it was a really rewarding experience.
All right, so I think the last time we saw a slide like this, it said 53 days remaining. 52 days had just passed. They were extremely busy as we were, preparing our leaders, and as we, as coordinators, were preparing as well. So this takes us to the day before the day. And when I say the day, I mean the kickoff of the school year and our web and cell programs for the year. I have a photo of myself here the night before the day, and actually talking to the other coordinators, this is about how we all looked. I imagine a lot of the leaders looked like this as well, as we were nervous about all of the things we have to present the next day. Do we know well enough? What are the sixth graders going to do? What are the freshmen going to do? There was a billion things running through our minds, so I think probably not the best night of sleep for most of us. Which takes us to the day. On the day, I was up earlier than normal because there was a lot to take care of before school. I think that we were all in the same boat as coordinators. But as I was getting to my car, my phone vibrated, and before I started the car, I took a look at the phone, and
That's what I heard.
Happy first day, web people. Just got to school and the news is reporting live from the parking lot.
yes, so I started my day with that lovely message from Mrs. Diericks. And I don't think I responded to it because I was just going to get on the road, but my brain responded to it and was thinking, the news at 5:48. Now, I wasn't totally shocked because I knew the news was coming to the middle school, but I did not expect the news would get to the middle school before any staff would get to the middle school, so that was a bit of a shock. Luckily, later that day, the news reported the following.
On every vacation at a Virgo home.
And bear with us. We do not necessarily promote a Virgo personally, but
It's a lot harder. You can't, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
all right. So you're going to see here scenes from the middle school, but I'd say you'd see something very similar if you were at the high school the same day.
Welcoming new sixth graders. It's all part of Bett Middle School's web program.
It's where everyone belongs. And what we're doing is we're trying to bring our sixth graders in early, before our seventh and eighth graders. We have about 80 eighth graders that are coming in, and then we are trying to form relationships.
The program connects sixth graders with eighth graders.
It's so we all have each other to be friends with, and we make lots of new friends.
So we have our web leaders, and they are students that have volunteered to sign up. They gave up 10 hours of their summer to be here and get trained.
We learned about teamwork, and we learned about how to help people so they can do what they need to do.
Crushing first aid jitters through team building exercises.
On the first day, we'll highlight people who we can talk to and go to, and meet people who are in our classes. WRS is really not that scary. Just you'll get used to it. Just have people help you.
Creating friendships before class even begins. In Bettendorf, Nina Burns, WQED Music.
This is the first year for this program, but Bettendorf Middle School's principal says you can expect to see it in years to come.
All right, so that takes us to the first day. You saw a lot of the types of things that we did on the first day right there. I'm going to talk in a little more detail on some of those things. So first day, we started, whether you were at the high school or the middle school, with a large sort of full class assembly, so all of our sixth graders or all of our freshmen. Web coordinators, cell coordinators led a lot of those big activities with the whole group. And the real focus there was to get students comfortable with the new building, build up some excitement for the first day, show that, one, everyone's welcome at their new school, and that it's fun. Like, we can have lots of fun at school as well as hit some of the more serious academics that we need to hit as well. After those big group activities, assembly, we moved on to small group activities, which is where our leaders really came in. So for this program, our sixth graders or freshmen typically are in groups of about 10, and typically we have 2 of our leaders per group. Sometimes it's 1 leader, oftentimes it is 2 leaders per about 10 students. And honestly, I think this is the core of the program. So these leaders worked with their small groups, helped those small groups get to know each other, start to make connections, kind of express themselves a little bit and build up that idea that it's a safe place for you to be yourself, express yourself, and for others to do the same. And also to make that mentorship connection. So that way our sixth graders or our freshmen can go through the halls through their day and see older peers that they recognize and know they can go to for that help. As far as school initiatives go, I know things like multi-tiered systems of supports come up a lot. Positive behavior interventions come up a lot. And when we talk about those, I know we talk about the adults and the professionals who provide those services. But I think it's really important we don't forget about the students who can be really integral parts of those systems. And I think that is really where Web and Cell shine, because it gets our students in here and lets them be some of those support systems and some of those positive influences in the lives of our younger students in the building. All right, as you can see there, numbers-wise, we had 302 sixth graders that went through this program on day 1. We had 398 freshmen plus, I apologize, part of our slides are getting cut.
24.
Thank you, plus 24. I believe those were high school students who transferred into the high school but were not necessarily freshmen, but still needed that orientation process and those connections in a new school setting. But I've talked for a while. I would like to let some of our leaders again talk about their experience here on the first day. Jaleel, yeah.
My name is Jaleel Tony Walker. I'm going to be talking about what we did on the first day. So basically when we got there, there's lots of adjusting that had to be done. We had to put ourselves into like a 6th grade mindset. And as a 6th grader, I want to be very comfortable with 8th grade just coming up to me like they know me or anything. So we just had to try to like get to know them well. So basically we sat there for like 6 hours. We got there like 6, which is very tiring. So then after that, we went to like a small room. We played all the games. Like we played name. So we had like a 6th grader that really like wanted to play with the balloons, and he couldn't rush me into it because we had to get through everything first. So it was just lots of we had to get used to them because they weren't very used to us. So for example, I had a student. She likes anime, and she told me that I should watch anime, but I just don't want to watch anime. So I told her that I'll try to watch it, which I never did. But you have to give them something. You have to try to relate to them as much as you can. And then another student got into trouble, and I told him that I'll give him something if he doesn't get into trouble no more. You really have to give him something to look forward to. So, for example, it'll be a prize for him, but in high school, it'll be like a good college, if you get a good grade on the test. So basically, there's lots of adjusting that have to be done. That's all I got. I'll be passing it around to a high school representative.
Thank you. All right, my name is Chaz, or Charles Lamora, and I'm a junior at the high school. On our first day, cell crew leaders greeted incoming freshmen with open arms and provided an energetic and encouraging environment for us to work in. We have to coordinate the activities we learned in our training, including assignment sets led by Ms. Zimmerman, and an amazing get to know you activity as well that we all had to participate in. We then introduced ourselves in our freshman small groups and taught them a few games and connected the essence, fun, and the thematic nature of how school can be difficult and to manage, just like throwing 3 paper balls around the room. Then we introduced ourselves, after our games, we gave some very nice advice towards our freshmen in their small groups, and just told them, yeah, this is not, these 4 years of your life are going to be a bit difficult, so better get used to it. No, this is my favorite part of what we did. We toured them around the entire school and put all the work and knowledge that we've acquired to use within our immaculate school. We brought in costumes, props, and all the pride that us cell crew leaders have earned to put to use. And that was all. You're welcome.
Thank you, Chaz. Good evening, directors. My name is Charlie Silver, and I'm a junior here at BHS. Now, as Peyton and Chaz detailed, us cell crew leaders prepared in advance. We invested our time, our energy, our voices into any true high schooler's horror. 4 whole hours of extra sleep that we could have had that morning. But to what end? From my experience, a resoundingly positive one. The freshmen were enveloped in slightly cheesy activities that distracted them while they familiarized themselves with different classrooms, new teachers, and more that could pique one's anxiety. On top of this, serious topics such as time management, meeting others, and stress relief were broken down within these low-pressure activities. Back in January of last year, it was freshman me's first day in the building after being online for an entire semester. It was nerve-wracking, different, and a hard day to transition into. Now, with the continued investment of cell crew's time, energy, and less sleep, I believe that no freshman will ever have to face the same again at BHS.
All right, I apologize. I skipped a slide earlier, but I do think it's important. We've heard perspectives from our student leaders and from people who are organizing Web and Cell, but we obviously have a lot of other staff members as well, so we thought providing their perspectives would also be important. I won't read through all of these, but these are comments that we received when we sent surveys out to both the middle school and the high school staff, just to get their perspective on how Web and Cell was going, since this was a very new program and a very different start to the school year than in the past. So just some of the highlights here. We heard that it was the best opening day in someone's career. They just really loved the atmosphere and the environment that the opening assembly created. A lot of positives about students leading their peers in these activities, and being able to develop that leadership in our 8th graders and in our upperclassmen at the high school. So from a teacher perspective, it was very overwhelmingly positive when they got to see the program in action and some of the early results from the program.
I'm Laura Lee Cole. I am a counselor at the high school. Here's the video. So there's a couple of videos. If you could go back one. These are at the high school. I don't know if you're able to show the left one. The one on the left is the gauntlet. So this is how we welcomed everybody, all the freshmen, into our building. So they kind of came in a big group. And the next one, I don't know if you need to show it, but it's just, we're trying to teach them the Bulldog chant. So we went to a couple of follow-up day trainings here in September, towards the end of September. This was included in the price with, yeah, you can skip that one. That's the Bulldog chant. Okay. Notice the lack of participation in the audience. This is why we're training them. They need this training before the first day activities.
And they might have almost outdone all the other classes that day at the first couple.
They almost did.
What they did is they put pressure on the seniors to up their game for homecoming.
So we went to one follow-up day training in September that was linked to the original training. That was, I'm going to come back to this one if you could skip ahead. One more. This one, okay. So, and at this follow-up training, this is more about how to continue the program throughout the school year. So there's some follow-ups that these cell crew leaders would do with their groups, with their small groups. One is called academic follow-ups, and that is where we train our leaders to go into classrooms. Like we would do all 9th grade classrooms, middle school would do all 6th grade classrooms, and deliver some kind of material that would ease the transition into middle school and into high school. The second type of follow-up is a social follow-up. These are designed to help continue to create those connections with the cell crew leaders and the web leaders so they can continue to have that upperclassmen either at the high school or middle school connected where they can ask questions. Other things come up throughout the school year that they're unfamiliar with. These events need to have meaning, they need to be organized, and sometimes the social follow-ups might include just something fun like a movie night. You can do them in big groups. They had a cocoa and crayon before finals, or you could do small groups. You could just do something with your specific small group. If you go to the next one. The other type, there was one other type of connection, and that is structured leader-initiated contact and then leader-initiated contact. And this is when our cell groups leaders are getting together with their small group just to still make that connection with them. It's not really a social, but it's not also neither academic. So they're developing some skills in guiding them throughout high school, middle school. And we're actually doing our first one of these in October, next week, Monday, Tuesday of next week. You want to go back to, sorry, we had these in order, out of order. One more, forward, there you go. So middle school had their first one of these leader-initiated contacts in September.
So for this day, we met with our web leaders for 2 days before and walked them through what all they would be doing, and then they actually went in and sat with their groups at lunch. So the web leaders went to 6th grade lunch, sat with the 6th graders, and they had some topics prepared to talk to their 6th graders about, and then they had a little game of would you rather, and then we treated them to some cookies as well. Also, tomorrow is our next web day, and they will be doing leader-initiated contacts and greeting our 6th graders when they're coming into school tomorrow.
So our first ones are Monday and Tuesday of next week, in which our leaders will get together with their small groups of freshmen, go through another get-to-know-you type game, do check-ins. We've given them a list of questions that they can ask about homecoming. How is Flexi-Sketch going? Have you joined any clubs or activities? Just to do a first check-in. And I think there's one more if you keep going. This one? Keep going. No, at the end. Keep going. There you go. And our final slide is another connection with PBIS and our culture and climate. So all of these activities, as you can see, focus on the positive. Even if you get things wrong, you celebrate, you clap. Even when you guys failed a couple of times at the number game, we started over because we're going to finish it. We're going to keep going. We knew we could get it. It strengthens the peer-to-peer relationships within schools, with our students, and with the adults in the schools, because the adults are not just standing up giving directions, they're hearing these directions from their peers. It helps develop leadership within the student body, because we're training and tapping into students who can become leaders and have those leadership skills. But this isn't a time sucker. You put a lot of time into the beginning of the school year, but after that, it's just check-ins. It's not a lot of time for the students. And the heart of the program is really creating that connection with the culture where students can feel safe and secure within their buildings. Thank you.
Can we ask a question? Sure. With all you kids, all the stories, you work with other students, do any of you
Dr.
have?
Castro, could you use your mic just for the recording,
Oh,
please?
usually I don't have to use it, but I will use it. No, I will. With all those other kids you worked and tried to develop and get accustomed to school and the routine, do any of you have like a really kind of a neat success story to point out the things you've been doing, really hitting home, and you can see a change in a student? Chaz, if you want to come up and say something.
So fourth block, I have honors bio 2, and in first block there's this kid that I met in their small group, and every time that he goes in the classroom, just get like a little remediation packet or something. He says, Chaz, I remember you.
Oh, yeah.
You helped me around the school that one day.
Yeah, so you connected with that student very well.
Yeah, and all these different kids I see throughout the hall, and I still say hi to them, and like see how they're doing, and it's always just a pleasure to see them and see a smile on their face, and it's a good time.
Great. And the rest of you have a like connection story you feel you've connected really well with the student at all?
So I see this one student like probably like almost every day. He like comes up to me and just says hi, and just like says like how you doing, and I ask him the same question. You know, it's just good to see like what he said, a smile on his face, and just like knowing he's having like a good time at the middle school, and like I put like a good perspective in him. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. So I'm curious.
This is great to hear. I am curious, as you think back, were those 10 hours of summer that you gave up enough to feel like you're ready for this? Or would you have liked a little more, or maybe a little less?
Absolutely, they were.
No more. They're here and right.
I'll probably say we need a little less because I feel like 10 hours is a little much. I mean, yeah, 10 hours during the summer is a little much because I wanted to sleep and have fun. And we pretty much just did like, we have to get used to the same thing over and over because we knew that 6 years was going to take a long time to get used to. So we just have to keep doing it. 8 hours would be okay.
Let's get to watch anime.
Any other questions from our directors? Well, I'd like to take a moment just to thank you guys. This is incredible work that you're all doing. Dedicating time during your summer to come in and support your fellow students speaks volumes, and we are so proud to have you represent us.
Thank you. That was a great presentation.
Cell crew and web crew, especially cell crew, you guys have finals, so please feel free to go prepare for your finals. Yeah. All right. After that great presentation, we will move on to 4.02, President's Statement. And at this time, any member of the audience may address the board with comments or about items of interest or concern. Please state your name and address, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes. As a reminder, Iowa law prohibits discussing specific employees or their job performance. Please refer to the policy 213.E1. Additionally, we caution those making public comments that what they say could violate the rights of others under the law of defamation and invasion of privacy. And if you are unsure of the legal effect of your remarks, you should seek independent advice prior to making your comments. Welcome.
Okay, I'm Kevin Rowling, and I teach down at the middle school. I teach 6th grade science. I just wanted to take a moment to address the board and the community to let you know how much I appreciate the work that has gone into controlling the behaviors at the middle school. Last year, myself and several others stood up in front of you and shared our concerns about the behaviors of students at our school. As you are aware, our community became concerned about this and much attention was brought to this matter. Over the summer, it is obvious that our administrative team heard what we were saying, and we appreciate that. We now have people who are hired to be hallway monitors, which has stymied the amount of students out of class and in the hallways. We have parent volunteers who help with outside duty and lunch duty. Our administration is much more visible in the halls and are making behaviors a top priority. Our new administrative hires make student behavior a top priority and deal with it in a very timely manner. And their communication with us is a breath of fresh air. So I stand in front of the board, the administration, and all those who are part of the change, and I say thank you. We are far from perfect yet, but I for one, appreciate the time and effort that went into these changes and making Bettendorf Middle School a calmer, safer place to be for students and faculty. Thank you.
Melissa Zumdo, 3328 Southampton Drive in Bettendorf, and that was a perfect introduction to my message today. It was my first day coming in and volunteering as a parent, and unfortunately I wasn't able to go online and sign up because it was full. On United Way, all the sessions were closed, which I'm hoping is because all spots are filled. But there is still a definite need for support. And I know after speaking with Mr. Hartley today and a few other staff members, they agreed and they were super fast. Like, we're going to look into this because we definitely appreciate the help and support and the fact that I was just there to be there as another set of eyes. But walking through the middle school, it was nice. I mean, most of the students were behaving. There was a few, you got to keep in line. But overall, it was a great experience, and I was happy to be able to participate. And yes, it was a positive environment overall. And I want to make sure that online that there are opportunities and it's easy for parents to sign up, because right now it's a little bit of a challenge. So if we could at least look into that to make it a little bit easier for parents to access the opportunity to volunteer, because I think we have way more support and it does make a difference. So thank you.
Patricia Dwight, 10 Lakeview Court. Start with this. Luke 17:2. It's better for a person to have a milestone wrapped around your neck, thrown into the sea, than it should cause one child to fall into any kind of sin. The Bible. So before I could start walking into the halls of the middle school, which I greatly enjoyed, I had to watch a video about sexual assault and sexual abuse. Not easy for me as a survivor. But my official word here today is my daughter's officially been groomed by a high school teacher, asking sexuality questions to her while in class. Not appropriate. She didn't know what to do, what to say, very uncomfortable, very nervous. She was messaging me, what do I say, what do I do? And I told her just ignore it, walk away. At the middle school, I enjoy walking around with the kids. I'm making some really good connections, and I feel like I'm going to hopefully be very impactful to a few of the students that really just need love. But one young gentleman was caught doing something. As I caught him, he asked me to take care of a part of his member of his body parts into my being. So I addressed this right away, and I said, you cannot talk to me or an adult like that. You have that is unacceptable, that's sexually not acceptable, and you may not talk to me. The vice principal got in charge or involved. He told me to step aside and dismissed me, not making the student apologize, which I think that at that moment he should have diffused the situation and had him apologize to me. Before I left that day, I let the principal know and he apologized to me, so I valued that and I was thankful. I wasn't able to work at the school for 2 weeks, so when I came back, Mr. Freeling, he is the one that made the young gentleman find me and apologize to me. And then I had a discussion with the young gentleman that maybe you should watch what you say to young ladies or adult women, because your words go a long way. And I also addressed some behavior things that I've heard about him and told him, you're here for a minute. This is your education, your time to shine or your time to drown. So which one are you going to choose and be a better person and be a better role model? So he hopefully will listen. I'm not sure. But lastly, I just appreciate being able to be in the schools with the kiddos. All of the staff that I'm working with has been very helpful, very kind and polite to me. When I have a concern, they seem very concerned as well. But lastly and mostly, real quick, I think these kids need unconditional love. They need your care. They need to know that you care and that they matter and that their voices need to be heard, and they don't need indoctrination of anything else. They just need love.
Anyone else wanting to come forward? Now would be the time. All right.
Well, I think we've been in school for over a month now, and I've had the opportunity to walk the halls of Bettendorf Middle School.
I know we all know you, but for a record, will you go ahead and do that?
Cindy Dearest.
Just for the recording.
6492 Pro Valley Drive, Bettendorf, Iowa.
Thank you.
Congratulations, you guys have the most amazing staff at Bettendorf Middle School. Mr. Hartley is incredible, Justin Galbraith, Dr. Buddy, Ms. Shelf, Holland. Oh, they are amazing and they're wonderful to work with. Your teachers, every day we get to hear how appreciative they are of us being there. And it makes us feel like we are making a change and a difference for the better. We would like to be able to do this at the high school, as I was contacted by one of your private security people who has recently walked off the job. So if you can open that up to us, the parents would be more than happy to come into the Bettendorf High School as well, walk the halls and assist you all. Thank you very much.
Anyone else may come forward at this time. All right, that brings us to 4.03, Board Shared Communication. Director Pastro, can we begin with you, sir?
I enjoyed really a great deal listening to those kids, well-spoken, very intelligent, and Laura Lee Cole looks like she should still be a sophomore in high school. Other than that, that's it.
Thank you, sir. Director Stetson.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to attend the chorus extravaganza. I sent this to the directors, but I was really, really impressed by the selection of the music. The theme of the night was inspiration, and it is clear that not only are they teaching the students to sing beautifully, but they are talking about the meaning of the words of the songs that they're singing. And I was so impressed by the way that the students can express, and then they even had some students express like the meanings of the songs, and I was just, I was very appreciative of that. I think that teaches our students that they have the ability to make change in the world, and that's, a lot of the songs have that theme in them. And you can tell that they're talking to the kids about the meanings of the songs and what those words mean and how they can live that in their lives, and I really, really appreciated that.
Thank you. Director Champion.
I just have a shout out to Bett Middle School Parent Link meeting last week. There was a board elected, so that organization has really hit the ground running. I've been attending, obviously, I have a son in 7th grade there at the middle school. I've been attending as a parent, but even before that, board elected, they already had several fundraisers plans and support for staff through conferences. I was just really impressed by that. And another shout out to all the Bettendorf Middle School staff who worked Tuesday night's Halloween dance. You're brave souls. I joked to Alan, I don't know who brought the idea of cookie frosting on the corner of the cafeteria, but the staff were amazing. I didn't hear a gripe, and I'm gonna be honest with you, I think you had sold 350 tickets, maybe you probably had 300 kids there. There wasn't a major behavior problem. I helped Parent Link sell concessions, and I somehow ended up standing right under a speaker. I couldn't hear a word, and I made all the kids repeat what pop they wanted like 8 times. And none of them got snippy with me, and they were all respectful and polite. So I was there for 2 hours, and it was just, frankly, it was a really good time. So I appreciate Alan working to get that going again, and it was kind of a deep dive because it hasn't happened for a few years. So I just wanted a shout out to the staff, and I also want to mention Kurt's custodial staff over there. I sent an email out, but within 15 minutes they had that cafeteria restored. It was absolutely amazing. So I just, like I said, I was just so impressed throughout that dance on the demeanor of everybody. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Director Lynch.
I have nothing to report except to remind us that because I cannot attend IASB's convention this year, we will need to select one of our people attending to be our delegate at the delegate convention at our next meeting.
Thank you for the reminder. Director Dorder.
Yes, I just wanted to report I spent a little bit of time at middle school today as well, right around dismissal time, and just wanted to congratulate everyone there. It was lovely. The kids are doing a beautiful job. I think a lot of that is contributed to a lot of what's mentioned, but also our cell and web crew, how timely that they came to present tonight, because I can just feel how connected the kids feel. It's just a really great thing to see. And you know, I never really realized how big middle school is until you're standing there walking the halls and kind of experiencing it for yourself, right? So good reminder of kind of what our kids are experiencing when they're there. And then I also got to see the art club, and I think it's the first week of wrestling this week, and got to witness Mr. Hartley, you know, reprimanding some kids in a very nice way, and they were respectfully responding to him. So it was really great to see. So thank you everyone there. Oh, and I'm really sad I'm missing the concert tonight, by the way. So I hope all of those students are doing a wonderful job. I'm sure they are. It's always a great concert.
Thank you, Director Dorder. And Dr. Pevich.
I went to Charlie Erpelding's wake on Saturday, and it was very impressive to see the amount of people that she touched with the turnout, and may God rest her soul.
Thank you. And then kind of piggybacking off of what Director Lynch said, I'm going to encourage my fellow board members through the end of the month to keep getting through some of those IASB pieces, because we're this close, guys. We're this close to a pretty big honor, and I'm super proud of that because very few boards in our state receive that honor, and I did get word officially that our superintendent will be recognized there as well, so we'll have more information to come on that coming in November. So keep earning those credits. Right. brings us to 4.04, Superintendent Report. Dr. Morris.
Good evening, everybody. Again, I just want to, before you leave, nice try. Senora Zimmerman. No, it won't take long. I just want to give another thank you to Shelley, Laura Lee, Christina, Landon, and Rachel. They are humble in their, they were very humble tonight in the amount of time, energy, and dedication that they have put into. It was a very big lift from the time they went to training in April to what they pulled off this year. They're extremely humble and dedicated to the work that they do, all of them. I know there were a lot of others, and I appreciate the support of administration at both middle school and high school to support them in this work. And so I want to thank them again personally for all that they did, because they set all of our students up for success when we opened the school year. But the fun part about all of it on the first day, I wish Landon was still here, is I arrived at about 6 o'clock that morning, and he was wrangling all of the web crew leaders on the bleachers to get them ready. He says he looked like that bloodshot person on the screen. I've never seen anybody with so much energy bouncing around all morning, and his enthusiasm is infectious, right? And then I get over to the high school, and I unfortunately missed the gauntlet because I was at middle school, and I hear Christina's voice. I hear her, and I'm like, where is she? In this sea of like 400 freshmen and then staff, and I'm like, okay, I know she's in this room somewhere. And so we joked how we needed to get her the band conductor's, stand that they stand on so we can see her. The same with Laura Lee and Shelley. Obviously, their height is, just like for me, a challenge at times. But they are running around the gym. You would never have known we had 400 plus students in there engaged in activities. They just had them moving and going and listening and following directions right away. So I just want to say thank you to the 5 of them again for all that they've done and their dedication to this program, because we are truly blessed to have it, and we're blessed to have them in our organization. So thank you. Now, go home. I know it's been a month since we had a board meeting. Right after our last board meeting, I want to say thank you to our Bettendorf Community Schools Foundation. They made a generous donation of $31,000 to our district to assist us in purchasing math intervention materials. I will get the words out for our 5 elementary schools. An amazing donation and commitment. As always, they are a great group who are dedicated to supporting our students. But as a result of that generosity and a little bit of ESSER funds, all 5 of our elementary schools now will be using an intervention program called Bridges for Tier 2 and Tier 3 math intervention. We will be just as we adopted our new math curriculum a year ago, we will be fully aligned in all 5 of our schools with math intervention as well as Tier 1 core instruction. And we definitely could not have done that without their generosity. So I just want to thank Michelle Lamone and the entire board of Bettendorf Community Schools Foundation for their generosity. Did I miss anything, June? Okay. Student hunger drive. Where's my high schoolers? My goodness, you guys are amazing. And what I love about this year, not only did we win the kickoff event against PD, who has to brag, right? That was a fun night, so thank you all for all that you did that night. They have worked tirelessly to, just like they did for homecoming, to create this experience and engage all of our students in the district in an efforts to raise money and collect food for those in our community who aren't fortunate. And so they had high school student council reps, went to every elementary school, and I believe the middle school as well. But at the elementaries, they did all school assemblies to get them excited. And then every school has created different activities that they're doing, and then they worked with the middle school student council, who are also engaged in activities to raise money and collect food. One of the fun ones I saw, Hoover just completed their coin challenge, where they had grade levels paired up, and they were collecting coins in gallon jugs. Mark Twain has a Fill the Shield contest. So apparently, in his spare time, Mr. Udy is swimming in a kiddie pool in his, I'm kidding, he's turned it into a Captain America shield. And that's how they're collecting food. And then at Grantwood, they're doing different challenges to collect food as well. So all of our schools are engaged, along with middle school, just as a unified effort across the district to serve others and help others. I won't say any more, Dylan and Charlie. I know I stole some of your thunder. But I'm just proud of the work that you all are doing in your leadership. This too happened just shortly after our other board meeting, but 3 of our own art teachers, Steve Andreessen, Chrissy Block, and Megan Purcell, gave of their time recently on a Saturday. They presented and led professional development at the Art Educators of Iowa Fall Conference at the Figge. This conference was attended by over 100 art educators across the state and the region. And so, as I've said many times, we are blessed to have amazing staff who are dedicated and continually go above and beyond. And this is just another example of our staff going above and beyond and sharing their gifts and talents with other educators across the state. So, as Dr. Pievich said, we just came off of a very difficult weekend where we were able to honor a former Bulldog, who will always be a Bulldog. But thank you to Christy Kleppe, her team and staff. Thank you, Kurt Pratt, and your team for all you did to ensure that this family didn't have to think about those arrangements so that they could spend time with family and friends, honoring, celebrating a beautiful individual. And then they also made arrangements on Sunday for the family to be together in our commons and have lunch together, and just as that weekend came to a close. So again, I just want to say thank you to the high school team and the operations team, custodial team, for all that they did, and all of the countless volunteers who surrounded this family and helped provide support in what was, I can't even imagine, the most difficult time ever. It is hard to believe that 9 weeks has gone by, and tomorrow ends our first quarter of the 22-23 school year. Wow. I think that's why we're all feeling tired, but also quite a bit of excitement. We have so much to celebrate and be proud of. Our staff, our students, families, volunteers, for all that they've done to teach expectations, to be consistent in those expectations, appreciative of all the hours that staff and volunteers have done just to kick the school year off in a great way. I had the privilege of meeting with our Parent Executive Council last night. So it is our PTA, PTO, and Booster executive leadership boards. Oh my God, I don't know that secondary could finish their meeting because they were so loud. We were on opposite sides of the wall. They were having a great time, but the energy in the room and just the excitement they have that they're now able to be back full time, hosting fall festivals, family nights, raising money to support our teachers. They are just a great group, and thank you. I saw her. Where'd Bree go? I know you're back there somewhere. They had asked for her to come in and help them make sure that they're filing their taxes correctly when they do those games of chance, the carnivals and things. And so I appreciate her taking time out of her night to come and answer all of those questions. And then Celeste gave them an update on branding and helped them recruit people to be in focus groups to make sure that that work continues and moves forward. Our second facility advisory committee meeting will be Monday, October 24th, so it's coming up. At our last meeting on the 3rd of October, right after our last board meeting, this great group who's come together from the community, staff, parents, and students had the opportunity to learn about the physical assessments that OPM conducted on our high school and middle school buildings, kind of learn what their purpose was, what the function of the committee was. On Monday night, the focus will be on our elementary buildings, the physical assessments. They're going to start going over the educational assessments that they conducted with building leadership. And Bree, Kurt, and I will be providing some follow-up information to questions that were asked at the last meeting around demographics, enrollment, and finance. Did I miss anything, Kurt or Bree? Those are our 3 topics, right? But it was a great conversation with that committee. They had great questions and really just dove in feet first to the work, and it will continue. So we look forward to meeting with that group on Monday. And I believe I am done. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Morris. Brings us to 4.05. Director of Finance, Bree.
policies?
I can, yes. Unfortunately, as we were finalizing the agenda, we noted that the wrong draft of a couple policies got loaded, and so we want to make sure everything is accurate before we present it to you. We apologize for that. Sometimes when you're working in track changes and you're following the process so you know what was previous versus what's proposed, we just noticed an error today, and I apologize, but I wanted to make sure the information was accurate before we brought it forward to you. And before Bree speaks about something she and I were at last week, one last thing. I had the privilege of attending with 17 other staff members, including Karen Allison, counselors, teachers, and administrators from all of our schools, the Iowa Best Summit, Social Emotional Summit, last Monday and Tuesday in Des Moines. The state puts this summit on at no cost to schools. And we were able to engage in learning around best practices for how to support our students and staff with social emotional behavioral health. And it was just a tremendous opportunity as a team to be there. It's also part of, as you know, we have 2 grants in the social emotional behavioral health arena, and that also is part of what those grants were for, is to engage in that professional learning so we can continue to expand our services and our practices. And now, Bree, it's all yours.
Thank you. So I'll start with what Dr. Morse was referring to. She had the opportunity, or maybe the unfortunate opportunity, to come to an IASBO conference with me.
Oh, that was great.
Yeah, she was around 300 of her closest SBO friends, but they had a good track for some of the neuroplasticity, some of the work that we're doing here around PBIS, and so that was her interest there. We also had some updates from the Department of Education, and interestingly enough, I went to an ASBO International Conference in February on a scholarship, and the keynote speakers that we saw there actually presented at the Iowa conference, so Dr. Morse got to see them and learn about their work. It was a great opportunity, and again, I always appreciate the professional development and wanted to report back on that. And then in the finance office, we are still hot and heavy with state reporting. We closed out 1 year. We're getting ready to report on a new year and setting up budget for the next year. So we are working on multiple years right now. We are trying to get all of our reports done. There have been some issues with the Department of Education portal being available. So they have delayed some deadlines. We continue to work on that. In our next board meeting, just a heads up, you'll have some authority requests come through for LEP, some of those allowable growth items. So you'll see those in November when we finish those reporting items. And then we're also gearing up for open enrollment billing. The state has changed that on us. That was one of the updates that we received. So believe it or not, we're getting ready to send out invoices. Our count is done, and we're going to bill for those students that we are serving. And then we are gearing up in the finance and HR departments for our flexible benefits open enrollment process to start here at the end of October on Halloween. In addition to getting candy, you can sign up for flex benefits. So win-win. Thank you.
As Bree said, it was a tremendous couple days of learning. As I do believe I was the only superintendent there, but I got to meet a lot of the people in our finance and business departments across the state and learned a tremendous amount from them. Mr. Hartley, thank you for the, I was remiss and missed one of my notes. I want to also give a shout out to Ellen Craig, who is an art teacher at the middle school, in her time and energy to coordinate the art conference that our teachers presented at. So, like I said, we have amazing staff. And then, last but not least, definitely, it is National Principals Month. For me, it's National Principal and Administrator Month, because without the amazing team of principals, assistant principals, deans, and directors that we have, and assistant directors that we have in our district, none of what you hear about each board meeting would even be possible. They not only are administrators, but at the school sites, they sometimes are moms and dads and counselors and nurses and doctors and all that goes with whatever needs to be done. Custodians, they jump in, they do it, always with a smile on their face, and I just appreciate the work that they do. Thank you to all of them.
All right, brings us to 4.06, BEA. Welcome, Kate.
Good evening. It's hard to believe we are wrapping up the first quarter already tomorrow.
While it has gone fast, our teachers are definitely feeling like they are in the thick of things with full plates. We had a great turnout earlier this month at our BEA meeting, as well as our members' Happy Joe Night earlier this week. It was great to see everyone, and we hope everyone enjoyed the good food and better company. Earlier this week, ISCA held a special education advocacy committee call, and we are excited to get our special education committee up and running. On Monday, we held our second roundtable with Central Administration. We are continuously working with them to support our teachers. Some of the things we are currently working on are options for classroom coverage when there are no substitute teachers available, special education support, para support, and conveying the workload and stresses on our teachers. Our hope is that by remaining in open and honest communication regarding our members, we're able to effectively come to an agreement on items to support our teachers. Currently, Emily is in Denver at a National Education Association President's Training where only 25 presidents of local units are in attendance. She and I remain in communication where new learning is being shared. This upcoming week, middle and elementary teachers will be holding conferences, and we wish them a productive and successful week, leading everyone into a much-needed fall break. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. 4.07, Vasa. Welcome, Melissa.
Good evening. As the first quarter draws to a close tomorrow, I continue to be impressed by our students and staff and their commitment to making this year amazing. Like every journey, there have been some bumps in the road, but we continue to move forward solution-focused and strive to make every day better than the one before. I also want to give a quick shout out to Katie Howard and the BHS Theater Department on their production of Almost Maine last weekend. It was a great show. For some of our seniors, tomorrow will be their final day of high school. Some of our staff had the opportunity to celebrate one of our early graduates today. This student has spent a great deal of time with staff members and the ones that she considers safe adults in her life, and today was a wonderful reminder of why we do the things we do. We are incredibly blessed to have careers where not only can we impact the lives of our students, but they, in turn, can impact ours. Our peer mentoring program coordinators are working on putting together our timeline to launch our pilot program and are learning more as we go. We want to be sure that the program we implement will be one that meets the needs of not only of our new and incoming staff, but our seasoned staff as well. We have professional development for our paraeducators scheduled with the AEA on the morning of October 28th, and middle school has a multi-session PD scheduled with their paraeducators over the course of the year in relation to the therapeutic classroom grant that they received. Best is also looking at some additional PD that would be facilitated by ISEA or one of our local universities for next year. As I was working on this report, I received a message from a friend who's also an educator in another district. I think it sums up what our goals should be as educators every day. Be the reason someone feels welcomed, seen, heard, valued, loved, and supported. I think our web and cell crew teams, as well as our BCSD staff, exemplify this every day, and I couldn't be more proud to be a part of this team. Our next roundtable is October 24th, and our next BESA meeting is November 7th. Thank you.
Thanks, Melissa. Next up, welcome, Dylan.
Good evening, everyone. Sorry. I'll try to keep this brief. I know most of you know from Dr. Morse's introduction. We are full swing into Hunger Drive, so every single student council member is doing everything that they can to get as much food and monetary donations for those in need. Just huge shout out to the entire student council and members of other leadership organizations in this school that have been helping us in our goal. So just kind of going into it a little bit, we've been planning lots of new events and soliciting. So if you didn't know what soliciting is, that's when we stand out at Hy-Vee and Fairway a few days a week from 4 to 8 o'clock at night, and we ask people for donations or to buy food inside and give it to us. We are all required to do it, but I'm just very impressed with the amount of people we've had in student council that have gone past their required amount just to make sure that we can get as many donations as possible. And then huge shout out to Hy-Vee and Fairway for allowing us to do this, because without local businesses allowing us to do this, we wouldn't be able to. So overall, Hunger Drive, we've been involving the elementary schools and middle school more this year. Last year was kind of the first year we got them involved with allowing them to get donations with us. We sent student leaders over there to kind of ramp things up and talk to them. This year, they're doing pep assemblies, they're making videos, they're doing such a great job, and we're really proud of them. We're hoping that will elevate their excitement as they get toward middle school and high school, and then participate more once they get up here. So, also as Dr. Moore said, we won Filled the Truck against PV. We raised over $7,000 in a truck full of food. So that is a huge accomplishment that went toward our total for the Student Hunger Drive. And we had Capture the Cans yesterday, which is a capture the flag. You can play if you bring food or if you bring some money for us to be able to donate. That was at 7 p.m. yesterday, and I'm really impressed with the student volunteers and participation there. This whole week has been finals week, so in addition to Hunger Drive stuff, student council members have done Bulldog Charge, which is the energy drink stand that I kind of talked about for homecoming. We had huge success, so we've been doing that before and after school and during lunch. I made my first energy drink for someone this week. I'm not usually the kind of guy that likes energy drinks, but I made one, so yeah, it's a huge success, and all the proceeds to that go toward the Hunger Drive. And then the silent auction will be this Friday at both football games. That's kind of my big event that I do. I'm in charge of that, and we have over 25 baskets that will be there, and we will be taking donations, both monetary and food, at the table. So I would love to see as many people as I can there, and please spread the word. I know we have the advertisements out on social media, and we've been making announcements during the day of school. So, and huge shout out once again to our local businesses. You would not believe the amount of managers and supervisors that are so willing to help us, giving us products, giving us baskets. Some places aren't able to give us merchandise and will just write us checks for the Hunger Drive, which is truly incredible. So then we have Harvest Fest, Trunk or Treat, and a Halloween themed movie, which is all going to be the Hunger Drive Halloween type thing, which will be the 28th, the day before our Halloween break, or fall break. Obviously, there's going to be lots of activities aimed for both high school, middle school, and elementary school. The movie after probably more high school. And then we are working on Dodging Hunger, which is going to be a dodgeball tournament that we're going to be hosting at the middle school. And we're going to hopefully have a 500-pound donation. Sorry, I didn't explain that well enough. We're going to have representatives from each area high school participate in a dodgeball competition where the student council will bring their student council or our student council will bring 500 pounds of donated food back to their school. We're still in the works of that, so I can't guarantee an exact prize or an exact participation for that, but we are working on that. That'll be November 2nd. We are working on a Spirit Week as well and a pep assembly, which I believe is going to be the second to last week of the Hunger Drive, which I can get a date on that for you later, which we are just trying to ramp up student morale and just bringing up the participation in Hunger Drive. And then we will be canvassing neighborhoods November 5th, which is always a favorite for us. We are going around to all the local homes, and we're going to be asking people for some of their canned goods that they might not want anymore. The old can in the back that's expired, we'll take it. So that'll be November 5th. And then loading day, which is the last day for Hunger Drive, is November 10th. So that's all I got for Hunger Drive. And then this weekend, Student Council, we needed a bonding event. We've been working so hard, just needed something fun, not work related. So we will be going to a pumpkin patch and a haunted house together. And that will be this week on the Saturday. And then another event we have coming up is Student Council State, where we will be recognizing our very own Mr. Skillett for the State Student Council Administrator of the Year. That will be the 30th and the 31st. That'll be over the fall break. So other than that, everyone else pretty much covered the things going on at the high school. Huge shout out to musical people, sports, and the marching band. They have wrapped up their competition season. They have one more football game and a showcase. Are there any questions I can answer regarding Hunger Drive? I would be happy to answer those. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, brings us to 4.09. Dr. Morris did touch on this for a little bit, that it is National Principal and Administrators Month. I just wanted to say a couple of quick words that, the work that you do daily is so incredibly important. It is so appreciated, and you truly are changing the lives of the children within our community and ensuring a really strong future. So I cannot express the appreciation that I have for your dedication. It's impacted my own family in such positive ways. So again, thank you for what you do, and please, if your counterparts are not here, express the board's thanks for us, please. So any of the board members want to say anything this time?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And Director Lynch is going to help me out with 4.10.
First of all, I would like to apologize in advance to our veterans if I make any mispronunciations. The fault is on my own. I would like to note that our district boasts veterans from the Army, Navy, Marine Corps, Air Force, and National Guard. And those veterans are Larry Bush, Paul Castro, Brian Deach, Danny Flink, Robbie Burney, Thomas Hackett, Brian Hess, James Keel, Gary Larson, Daniel Middleburn, Gerald Gordon, Kevin Rowling, David Silverberg, John Staber, Deb Thomas, and Diana Williams. We thank you sincerely for your service.
Thank you, Director Lynch. Brings us to 5.01. Do I have a motion?
I can make a motion to approve 5.01, the consent agenda.
I'll second that.
Roll call, please.
Director Champion?
Yes.
Director Dorter?
Yes.
Director Eastman?
Yes.
Director Lynch?
Yes.
Director Pevich?
Yes.
Director Smithson?
Yes.
Director Castro?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Thank you. Brings us to 6.01, District ISASP and FAST data.
So I want to thank Jamie Olson, our Director of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment. I know she's got her team here tonight to help. A lot of work has gone into getting this data ready for you all. And so appreciate her time and leadership on this project.
All right, I picked this picture because as I was putting this together, I envisioned this was all of you when you heard I was going to be presenting data. So there, thank you. It was a little anticlimactic afterwards, but one of the things that Dr. Gelati taught me when he was here was whenever you look at data, you have to remember every number, there's kids behind that. And it's all about the kids. And so what you're going to see throughout my presentation is that just reminder. I was able to pull off pictures from every site to represent everybody that we're talking about tonight. You're gonna see we have room for improvement. We have great things to celebrate, but I always wanna bring it back to the kids. And let's be honest, that kid in the blue is the cutest little thing there. I'm gonna go to Mark Twain and see if I can find him one day, just to know if he's always that happy. Just to start it out, we worked really hard on our strategic plan, so I always want to make sure that when we do something like that, we're bringing it back to what our mission and our vision is. I don't want to read to you, you know what that is, but I always want to make sure our focus is there and we understand where we're going and what we're reaching to. Again, you can see some of our high schoolers who are our future nurses or doctors or in the medical field. So with this, the majority of what I'm going to be presenting on is going to be around priority 2, our learning and achievement for all. And part of this is looking at the achievement of our students over time, right now, here in the moment, and where we want to be in the future. And so then we have our achievers there at Armstrong. All right, so we're going to start with our FastBridge data. If you remember when I came to you in the winter, when I was filling in this position, the data was a little messy because of COVID and some changes. Some of it's cleared up, but we have had a couple of changes that have happened in the recent year. And as we walk through that, some of my colleagues here are going to help explain some of that, but we're going to walk through, so we'll start with FastBridge. As a reminder, this is pretty much what you saw last year, but I don't suspect you went and memorized it. So it is a assessment that's given 3 times a year. We're going to start with the literacy side of it, and that's a reading. I put in the windows, so you know how that falls. The state sets a window. Their window is pretty broad because obviously they're covering everybody in the state, and we all don't have the same schedule. We then take that window and try to narrow it down to about 2 weeks. We have to get
creative because of just scheduling, and January and February are just a little bit messy because we are coming back from break, then we have days off, we have end of the quarters, and so we get a little creative with that. Grades K through 8 are participating in this, and this is where the data is going to get a little bit messy right now because this is the first year that 7th and 8th graders are participating in the A reading. Prior to that, the state only requires K6 to participate in, I'm going to say A reading, but it's really literacy because we'll get to kindergarten and first as early reading, but it falls under that same. And it was decided that instead of taking MAP, we would move to 7th and 8th graders taking that A reading. And I did ask Alan.
He had to step out.
He ran away. Apparently I scared him. But when he comes back, I'll let him. I was not part of the conversation of why that change was made. That happened before I did. But he was going to help you to understand why we felt that that was going to give us the data. And I thought coming from the people who were part of that conversation would be great. So your differences, early readings, K1, it's a one-on-one test. So every kindergartner, every first grader is pulled one-on-one and given that assessment. And that's 3 times a year. It does change throughout the year. It's not the same one that they take in the fall. It's moving along with them for those skill sets to see if they're on their way to proficiency with kindergarten skills. That's the same thing in first grade. First grade towards the end is trying to transition them to get ready to move into that more A reading where we're looking at more of a broader skill set. So when you go into the A reading, it is a computer test. So students sit down, they have headphones, all of that stuff, and it's looking at those broad abilities. One thing that we decided as a district this year, in order to collect even more data, is we took all of our 2nd and 3rd graders and we also gave them the CBMR. And that's that fluency accuracy side of things because we really felt that's covering the span of what we want to see in order to make sure we can meet those students' needs. In 4th and 5th, students that identified as being non-proficient in that A reading, we went ahead and gave them the CBMR also in order to make sure that we're hitting the gaps that we need to. We can always intervene, but an intervention isn't any good if we don't really know what we're trying to intervene on. And just to say, Jamie needs help, there's a lot of ways Jamie needs help and you need to drill down and figure out how she needs help. Dr. Morris, don't comment on how I need help, that's a private conversation. I forgot, and this is probably not appropriate, but it is Chad Udy's 50th birthday today. And he was so pumped that he got to come and listen to the data presentation for his 50th birthday party. So
He doesn't look a day over 49.
Well, you know.
You're just a kid, 27 kid.
And you know, the wind took his hair away, so that wasn't easy. So Chad and my sister went to school together, so they're one after another. So she'll kill me, but her 50th is tomorrow. So poor Chad never gets to live down any of his birthdays because I have to remember my sisters. So that was way off topic. Did Alan come back yet? No. All right. So that takes us through some of the changes that we did. If you go to my next slide. So this is going to take you through the reading side of things. And this is where you gotta work with me. In the upper left-hand corner, that is kindergartners over time, not the same students. Okay? Every kindergartner that's come in from the fall of 19 to the fall of 22. For those that wanted to see comparison of students, and I say that lightly because it's not an exact comparison. We have students that move out, that move in, that take it, that don't, but it's as close to a comparison as we can get. So what you're gonna see in that upper left hand is our kindergartners are coming in with skills that before they might have had. The reasoning behind that, we could go into a long thing. I think COVID impacted their access to preschools. It access to that socialization, that ability to be out, and we're just seeing kids, you know, maybe not where they were used to be when they came in. With that, that's adjustment on our part. That isn't us, we didn't do anything, but we're going to adjust to what that is. When you look at first grade, that 49 is alarming. The story behind that I want to tell you is those were the kids that in the spring of 20 is when we closed. And so they went on spring break and never came back. And so those kids never got the fourth quarter of kindergarten. Did we offer things online? Yes. I'm old, and sitting online and taking classes is very hard for me to stay engaged. And so when you ask a 5 and 6 year old to do that, it presented its challenges. And so our graph's cut off on here, doesn't it?
Yeah. Is there a way to minimize
If you go to view by width as opposed to by height, it might fix it.
Thank you.
Sorry, it's like a cliffhanger on the end there. So what you're looking at is the cohort across the time. So when you look at the class of 2032, that was the first column is when they were in kindergarten, and that next one was when they were in first grade. So I just took the graph above and I put the cohorts together. And then the class of 2033, and you'll see how it's going down the line there. All right, next one. So remember, those students are taking early reading. That's the one-on-one test with an adult 3 times a year. This brings you into the rest of our students, and they're doing the A reading, and that's that computerized adaptive test. And you're seeing, this is where it gets, again, messy, because remember, the fall of 20, I know you all remember my presentation from last winter, right? No. Okay. The fall of 20, we switched from A reading to CBMR. The reason that we did that was because it's much quicker, and we knew we were coming out of the closure, and we wanted to use some of the school assessments from previous standards to figure out where we needed to start. And that's why you don't see the black bar in most of those. Now, 6th grade went ahead and they gave that a reading test, and so that's why when you see those 6th graders across time, again, these are not like students. These are different groups of 6th grade students over time, but just to see kind of where they are. 7th and 8th are out there on their own because this is the first time that they've taken a reading. And at any point, stop and ask me questions. On cue, Paul.
Yes, thank you. Can you give me an example of a reading question that the kids might have to read?
Let's go straight.
Wow. There you go.
I love speaking in front of people, but so I'm Allison Holland. I am one of the Dean of Students at Bett Middle School. So my previous district that I worked in did FAST, and so that's why I know the answer to this question. So what it is they give you a passage, and then a lot of them are comprehension questions. And then those questions, depending on how you answer, they will get harder or they will drop down to find the real level of what they're reading. So they give you base questions, so it's a 3rd grade passage, they'll give you that, and they'll either keep you on 3rd grade, they'll bump you up to 4th grade, or drop you down. And so it's within the program, so the kids don't know if it's a 2nd grade or anything like that. It just does it.
Am I right? It's also vocabulary.
I was
I was gonna say,
there's a lot.
I remember the vocabulary part of it we only did it a couple of years when I was still at middle, but that was the part, it's a lot of vocabulary based. Hence why for some of our students, especially our 2nd and 3rd graders, this year as a district, we decided to go ahead and also give that CBMR. So the state allows you to pick one or the other to report as your state test. You can do a reading or you can do the CBMR. Both of them have value. A reading is the one that we take more consistently across the board, which is why that's what we report to the state. However, we feel that data that we're getting from that CBMR, especially for our younger students, is also very valuable because it does the fluency and the accuracy versus the reading and the vocabulary. Other questions so far?
This isn't an answer right now question, but I hope you speak to in the course of what you have left to say question.
Okay.
I'm interested in implications. Like, do you anticipate the introduction of the letters curriculum will be reflected in a few years' time in what happens with these numbers, or
Letters is a curriculum.
the letters program, the letters?
It will have a.
I will let Rhonda, who is her passion, you know the little boy on the front screen?
Yes, so letters professional development will help our teachers be able to better instruct with our new curriculum that we are going to be presenting shortly for the pilot and potential adoption. So pairing the teacher knowledge improvement with a research and evidence-based curriculum choice for every student at Dorf will make the difference for sure. And continued support through our coaching and curriculum team.
Key, I was like, she must be tired. Yes, and that's what this data is all about. I mean, especially as you're looking at it it's given 3 times a year, we're able to check how things are going. And part of the thing that I'll talk to you at the end is, what are we doing? Data is great, I can present it to you, but what are we doing with it? I make pretty graphs, maybe they're not pretty, but we put them out there, but what are we doing with that, and how are we using that to get to all the students achieving at a high level? And letters is definitely one, because up until this point, we all didn't view reading the same way. And that's what we found out as we went through that literacy committee last year, is we were looking at it at too many different, thank you, too many different lenses, that we weren't able to pick something consistently. So the flip side, which I think this is the most valuable when you look at it, is how are they doing over time? And so this is I call it cohort. This is by class. Whenever I do this, it always scares me. Our kindergartners will graduate in 2035. That seems like way, way out there. But when you look at this, the reason it only goes to 3rd grade, remember that your kindergarten and first are doing early reading. So if I put 2nd grade on here, there'd just be 1 bar. And that's a bar that you saw previously. So this is what you're seeing over time. As you count that backwards and you look at that, so those 8th graders, 72 was when they were in 8th grade. As 7th graders, they didn't take A reading. As 6th graders, they were the only ones in our district that took A reading. And then right before that was their 5th grade year. We are.
Yeah.
What you're gonna notice, and
say, this is a pretty bounce back. Like, we've obviously done some real work to bring those scores back up. Those are some pretty impressive numbers for a bounce back, for sure.
And I know last year when we talked, it hit us hard, the drop that we had. NATE testing did a really great article talking about looking at the effects of COVID over literacy and what that did. And they went as far as to break it down to different student groups, but also access kids had. They went as far to say kids who had internet access at home, kids who had access to adults in their life that could help them with their work versus those that maybe didn't. And it was very impactful to see how those just small variables really played a difference in where students were able to achieve, and then to see what groups were able to bounce back. And we're gonna look at subgroups later on, and we're gonna see that some subgroups are able to bounce back quicker than others. Next. So the flip side of this is math. It's called early math, or it's called A-math, whichever one. It's pretty much exactly the same, but we now go into that math world. Early math is 1-to-1 for K1, and then A-math is taken by 2nd through 8th graders. The difference here is Sixth grade took A reading because it was a state requirement. They didn't ever do A math. So it's new for sixth graders to be taking A math starting this year. Testing window's the same. They'll take A reading on one day, they'll take A math on another day, and all of that data comes together. So these are going to be very similar graphs, just looking at the math side of things. So again, these are different kindergarten groups over time and different first grade groups over time. I did not do a cohort comparison because of the bars. Like in 20, we didn't do any of the math, in the fall of 21, we didn't do any of the math. We did our own district assessments because we were trying to find gaps right away in where our curriculum was coming out of the pandemic. So it would have been a graph of just one bar for both of that. But the next one will take you through the graph if you'll look at the second through 8th grade. Again, what you'll see is that fall of 20 is there. I whited it out so it didn't, or I made it a white bar so that it didn't take those numbers. But what you'll remember is we did not do any sort of math testing that way. We used all our own district assessments. Again, you'll see 6th, 7th, and 8th are out there by themselves because this is the first year that they'll take it. So they'll take it again here in the winter, and then we'll have some comparison data. As you look at this, we are bouncing back. I think having now a Tier 1 math curriculum that's across the board, that's been in play for quite a few years. It seems like quite a few, but a couple of years now that students have been through that. I think we're seeing the effects on that. I can't begin to thank the foundation enough for getting us a math intervention that we can use across the district. That's been a big struggle for our teachers. We know we have struggling math students. We're not sure what to do with them. There's not a whole lot that's out there for true math intervention. So they were kind of left on their own to Google it, to see what they could find and kind of make it up. Bridges is going to be wonderful in that it has placement tests that we can give students that will help identify right away where their gaps are. What we are using right now takes hours to give to a kid. And so this will be a lot quicker so we can start those interventions right away, and classroom teachers can benefit from that too. So I'm very excited about the impact that having a Tier 1 curriculum has already had in conjunction with interventions through Bridges. And Marty has reached out to other school districts who use IM, which is our Tier 1 math curriculum, and have also implemented Bridges, and the connection has been really smooth for them. So I'm excited about it. It's not this outside thing that we're trying to make fit in. All right, so this is your groups, looking at your cohort data across time and how they've gone. You know, we've had some great growth as we look at a couple of these groups. We've had, if you look at our current 4th graders, they're staying steady right there as they work through that. I expect that we're going to continue to see great growth in math. There for a while I'm honestly going to say kind of piecemealing some things together. Math is not always the subject area that elementary teachers feel the most confident in. A lot of them reading, in college they'll be told, get your reading endorsement, do all of that. Not a lot have that comfort with math. I don't understand why, I love math, but, and so getting them the materials that are going to allow them to feel more confident in what they're doing is playing a big part there. So that brings us to MAP, and that's the measure of academic progress. This right now is only given in 9th grade. It used to be given in 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th. And this year we've gone to only giving that in 9th grade. Just like the previous one, our focus is on that reading and the math. It is also a computer adaptive test, works the same way. This one I can tell you questions that they're on because way back when we first started this, you had to sit by a student and read the questions to them. The computer didn't read it for them. And so you got to see it right in play. So testing window, Last year when I had stepped into this role for a while, one of the things that I had talked to the high school about was the way they were testing last year was they would take it at the beginning of their course and at the end of their course. But if you remember, that's in a semester, but our semester is worth a year. And so we weren't really able to show true student growth because in the winter you had the group finishing a class and the group starting a class both put in together. You couldn't separate them. So Christy worked really hard. She disappeared too. Boy, I run everyone off. Christy worked hard to figure out how that would fit into that block schedule and what that would need to look like. And so the data I'm going to show you is kind of anticlimactic because I don't have the second testing window to show you because they start that next week. So when I come back on the 14th to share some other data with you, I will update you with that comparison data of those students, which would be their midterm. So this is what it looks like over time. Again, when you look at this, you're looking at different students over those years. So each ninth grade group, that's different. I'm gonna call the elephant in the room. We've got a great concern here with the 56%. Marty and I brainstormed a lot today about what was going on there, what got us there. What I'm most interested to see is this next round. Do we bounce back or are we just right there or just a little bit above? That's gonna tell us a little bit more of where we need to go and what we need to do. But that is very alarming that we made that big of a drop. And that's why I'm glad we're taking another test here next week instead of waiting until January like we would have last year to see where that's at. So once we figure out we're able to dig more into that, then we'll work on what interventions need to be put in place for those students. High school is a little more challenging because it's so many different classes that students are in. So it's not like taking a fourth grader and intervening just that way, because in high school they could be in a lot of different math classes from the honors. Again, they're only ninth graders, but I think the top class they could be in ninth grade is honors geometry. Am I right? Yep. All the way down to pre-algebra. Okay. And so that's a large span of classes. So not only looking at the data, but we got to drill down to the kids, where they're at, and what can we do in that setting.
You may have said this and I just may have missed it. So this map data, Marty or Jamie, does this include all ninth graders or only the ones enrolled in math in first semester?
This is only the kids that are enrolled in math right now. Okay. And that's why we have the different testing windows. Celeste, if you go back 2 slides, I believe.
So as I got to look from a couple of our board directors.
Go down one more.
As you're getting there, if you remember on a 4x4 block, in 9 weeks we cover what a traditional 6th period or 7th period block does in a semester. And then in a semester we cover a year's worth of content. So unless you're in, it wouldn't be a math class, it's a year-long class, really. So students will have a semester off of math, unless like you're at the higher level and you're doing Calc AB followed by Calc BC. You're getting really 2 years of math in 1 year. So just wanted to remind you that, so we're not capturing every ninth grader.
No, I appreciate that. And that's where that second semester is. And so it may be I took map in first semester, and then I may take the English one in the second semester because I may be lucky and had math and English in first semester and took it both, and then I won't take it again until the following year, wherever it falls in my schedule.
So that makes it even harder, because if you see that a student is needing that intervention and then they're not taking that class for a half a year, then you can't even do the intervention to the next.
Yeah. And you could go from fall of 9th grade to spring of 10th grade without a math course.
Correct, you could, and I think that that's where using our data wisely, if I'm a student that we know is at risk in math and struggling in math, I think we have to be very purposeful when we create my schedule to ensure that as much as possible, that gap doesn't happen that way. With interventions, in my short time in this position and talking with Christy, it is a huge challenge at the high school. Because there's just a lot of moving parts, the way classes are set up, we have to figure it out though. We can't just look at the data and say we know it's a problem and walk away from it. So that's where Pride helps us out. That's where we get students to understand, and we make that, I think the big thing is to make the intervention meaningful, because without that, if they don't know why you're doing it or why they're being asked to do it, that's when you get that shut down and you're just going through the motions.
How do you intervene on 44% of your students?
Say that again.
How do you intervene on 44% behalf of your students?
So like at the elementary level, if you have...
Ninth grade,
but
44% of them are not proficient. So are you intervening right now? When do you decide to intervene?
We would intervene as quickly as we possibly can. Where I would look at is where do they fall in the classes. So if we're looking at those kids and a lot of them are in our algebra concepts class, so then we would even look at, does it need to be a class-wide intervention? Is there a tier 1 problem that we have going on?
Also, to answer your question, Dr. Pevich, yes, they are intervening. So if you remember that someone mentioned flexi schedule. So students sign up for Pride every day, and teachers have the opportunity to assign students to specific Pride sessions. And if each week in their PLCs, they are looking at data, and if they're noticing that students need that additional support, and I'm looking at high school just to make sure I'm not misspeaking, my understanding is then teachers will request that student to their Pride to give them that additional intervention and support that they need to be successful. Is that accurate?
It is. Sorry. I'm not used to not putting it right up. It is accurate. Marty Beck, I've met many of you before. I would also argue that two of the classes that I'm currently teaching would be considered intervention. They're below grade level courses. And so those students are getting courses before Algebra 1, where we are working on their gaps. I hope this next testing window shows that we're making progress. We think we are, based on our formative assessments. But hopefully this will show that as well.
The other piece that high school did, and Christy, not to put you on the spot as you walk back in, but correct me if I'm wrong, is as they looked at data from last year and looked at students, they recognized that with some of the disruption over the last couple of years, that transition from algebra and geometry to algebra 2, there was some skills missing. And so they created a algebra 2 concept, intermediate algebra 2.
Yep.
Go ahead, I'm gonna let you, now that you're back, I'm gonna let you speak to it.
Okay, I'm sorry, I don't know what you were talking about before I came in here, but.
So a couple things, because I think we're talking about kind of how we stuck with math, and so, or with math. And so on the math part of it, just recognizing a lot, we were seeing some struggles with some things, and the feedback from kids is moving too fast, they're a little bit lost. Math is really hard to learn online as we went into the pandemic, and that was the feedback from students. And so we kind of met, we're like, let's slow down, let's take the kids from where they are. Like, what if we don't get through all the material and they're not gonna be ready for Algebra 2? And I said, then we need to build kids from where they are. And so that's where we developed to go into intermediate Algebra 2 and identify students who need a little bit more. And then that way they can still go on to their senior year and take Algebra 2 based on what their secondary plan is and things like that. So that's kind of what we did with the math part of it. And then I don't know, do I need to talk about ELA?
I'm sure they wouldn't.
I just have a question.
Yeah.
Have you, and I'm sure that you have, so I'm sure that this is not a question that I probably already know the answer, but you're working with the middle school also with their 8th grade numbers, right? So
Yeah.
you're looking at them coming in and saying these kids are gonna need more help before they go into algebra.
Yep,
Okay.
so what we've done, and we've got to go back and relook at the assessments. When we went to standards-based IEP, we curriculum mapped all the way back to 3rd grade. And so we were looking at, these kids that are struggling in 8th grade, they were given an assessment to look at where do their actually standards fall, and then that's how they're placed at their 9th grade level. So we have a couple different levels at 9th grade. Actually, there's 3 to 4 different levels at 9th grade, and then we just kind of track them up from there depending on how they progress. So, yeah. Anything on language arts, because I don't know what was addressed.
You're great, and nice job coming in, not even knowing what was down there.
And I have one more question for you. So I just want to clarify, so that the number with the 56, that is very concerning, right? But that's not all of the ninth graders current.
146.
Of how many?
Say 350.
No, I think it's almost 400. As I say,
So we have 400 ninth graders, but only 100 and
only 146 took it.
took the test.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And that's why it's hard to compare even next to that 70, because you don't know how many each time took it. It's based on the schedule and how many math classes and what type of math classes were offered.
I mean, if you had all your honors classes.
Correct. Now with ninth grade, again, honors geometry is the highest that they can go. I mean, they can be placed in if they're coming out of our system. But I'm glad that you brought up the fact that I think last year, there was a lag in that transition from 8th grade to high school and ensuring that we were getting kids placed. And so that's one of the things that Marty and I have already started to talk about is how do we start that conversation right now? Because registration for classes comes really early when you're thinking about the year in whole. You know, we think the year ends in June, but really we're registering at the high school level so much earlier. We can't wait to have those conversations until we come back from winter break, because then we're scrambling. So we're already starting those conversations. What do we need to do? What data? This is one data point. What other data points do we need to collect to ensure that we're getting kids the support they need right when they come into high school? Dr. Peter?
What? So take the fall of 2021, we have 70% of proficiency in math. The 30% that are not, what is it that they don't understand? What is it they don't? Is there some sort of an example you can give me that they wouldn't know how to do, you know, make change for a $20 bill? I mean, what is it they can't do?
I'm gonna phone a friend.
It's kind of sad what some students don't know. What we call it is number sense. Some students don't have an internal number line. They can't even put 0, 50, 100, 25, 75 on a number line and space it correctly. They haven't developed that internal number line in their brain. We have some students who don't understand estimating. It's sad. Some can do some procedures. They can start. We have kids who don't know their multiplication and addition packs. It's hard to do algebra if you don't know how to multiply. And that's what we're working on in those intervention classes. And I would like to say, now that we know how many students that was, 35 of those are in my intervention classes. So I have 140, 35 are below grade level. So I would imagine this to go up when we add the other students.
So I have a question. A couple of years ago, at a board meeting, I remember seeing a presentation about doing, and I don't know if it was at the middle school or at the high school, but there was a class that was talking about number sense and getting kids involved in understanding that number sense more. Are we still doing something like that? That was 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
I'm thinking you're talking about our boost classes,
Yes,
or our plus
probably our
classes.
boost classes, yeah.
Absolutely. That's one of the main things we do every day to work on that. But it's hard, and this is, we have some students who don't see themselves as doers of math. And they've gotten a message that they can't do math. And so even doing simple, what we would consider elementary topics in high school, some of them are unwilling to try because they've met so much failure. So it's really hard to turn that around when they're all of a sudden freshmen, which is why I would also like to add my thanks to the foundation that we start intervening and have materials to do that at the elementary. So add that.
Other questions surrounding this? My hope is when I bring this data back to you that we can celebrate growth that we've seen and the interventions are working. So, but it's concerning. And how do we meet those students where we're at? Part of it is what students are coming, to us from our whole system, what students are moving in, and having to meet everybody at that different level. All right. So our next one is going to be moving into the statewide assessment, and so this is known as ISASP, Iowa Statewide Assessment of Student Progress. This is given to all students in grades 3 through 11. There were some changes, and when I say to this year, it really was last year. Remember, this is taken in mid-March, mid-May, depending on what your schedule is. So for us, it has to be given during the fourth quarter, and our fourth quarter doesn't start until the end of March, pretty much every year. So we're really looking at our testing to be the last week of March and to the middle of May. The changes that they made this year, reading is given grades 3 through 11. This year they made it an adaptive test, and remember, all of this is computerized. The difference between this adaptive test than the other ones that we've talked about is not question by question. And that was very hard for me to understand at first when they came out and called it an adaptive test. Because one of the things it allows you to do is go back and flag questions and skip a question to come back to it. But if it's adaptive, it can't do that question by question. So instead it's adaptive by section. So they'll break the reading down into 2 sections. So you'll take the first section, you can flag a question and say, I'm going to come back to that. But at the end, once you submit that section, then it takes how you did in that section and adapts the next section based on that. And you cannot go back any longer and change any of your questions in that first section. Then when you're in the second section, you can do the same. You can flag a question to come back to, you can change your answers, and then once you submit it, you're done. And so that's pros and cons to that, I don't know. It was our first time using it. I was glad to know, having taken it with a few students who maybe standardized testing is not their strong suit. I was glad that they could still skip a question and come back to it, because a lot of times within here are built constructed response, so they have to type. And for kids that have anxiety or writing is hard, they often want to skip those and come back to those at the end. So I did like that within a section, you still had that flexibility, because I think for some of those students, I pictured we'd get to number 2 and we wouldn't move any further because we weren't ready to go on with that. With that then is that language and writing. So language is still that computerized portion of it. The difference that came with writing was 2 years ago, or last year, or whatever, the previous year, it was 2 writing prompts. So you're given a writing prompt, directions on what it is that and then you were given that time to write it, which is really type it in there. Last year, I think they realized the amount of grading that took, and the amount of time. Hence, if you remember how long it took us to get our ISASP data back with the writing portion in there, they did move to a single writing prompt. For kids, that was heavenly. For those that had taken it before, to know they only had to write once was refreshing for them. Mathematics stayed as is. I know that they're playing around on whether or not they want to go to adaptive for math. I have not heard for the upcoming testing cycle if math has moved to adaptive or not. I just know last year when I sat in on a couple of webinars, they said that was possibly going to be coming down the line at some time. And then science is one that's only given in grades 5, 8, and 10. And they did change that to an adaptive test, very similar to the reading, where you have it in sections. We have not set our windows. We've started to talk about our testing windows, but we haven't set them. But I would suggest that they'll be as very close to this, although the state did shorten the window. I believe it's by 4 or 5 days, which usually wouldn't matter, except since it has to be in fourth quarter, we lose a couple of weeks in mid-March because we're not in that quarter. So we're going to have to do a little overlapping that we've tried to avoid in the past, just to not have too many on the server, internet all at once, but we'll be fine. I have faith we'll be able to get through that. So the next thing that we're going to look at then with ISASP data is our longitudinal data. These are our friends at Hoover who are doing some science experiments, checking out habitats. So the first thing that we're going to look at is the longitudinal data. across time. Remember, in 1920, we didn't take ISAS, we closed down before the testing window opened up. The other thing to remember with 2021 is that they were given the option of taking it online. Those kids, though, that took it online, because they were learning virtually, those scores were not brought into our data just because of test security and all of that. You don't necessarily know what's going on at the other side of that. So,
Jimmy, in 1819, was it computerized or not?
yes. And that was the first year that students had taken this type of assessment on the computer like this. And it was the first time that that I'm aware of, at the younger years, had taken any sort of writing standardized testing. And then we took the year off and then we brought it back. So again, these are different kids. As you look at these groups, you can see the drop for some of our grades as they came out of being closed for the pandemic. So if you look at, your third graders, you have to think of that in the fall of 2021. Those kids were coming out of being closed, and then that year was mostly hybrid. So when you look at 2021, I would like to say we got through the entire curriculum, but we didn't come back to full until we were probably end of February. And so the majority of the year was a hybrid year, 3 days, 2 days a week that they were in person.
But everyone in that black bar has experienced that.
Correct. They were hybrid because our virtual kids didn't get pulled, their data didn't get pulled into it. They were given results, but their results weren't counted in our scores because of the fact it was given virtually. This year, it was not an option, or last year was not an option for anyone to take it virtually.
Now, this is a crazy detail. As
Okay.
I recall, students who were doing online only were asked to come into the buildings to take the tests.
They were given.
Did those students who took the tests in the buildings, scores get included, and only the ones who took the test remotely excluded?
Correct.
Thank you.
Correct. If they came on site and we proctored the test, it counted. If they took the online version, which was totally separate, like we didn't have any real control over that, those results went to a different place.
Isn't the gold bar in column third grade is the same students in the black bar in 5 and the gray bar in 6?
Yes, I think that's right.
So say that again. The gold bar in 3
is the black bar in 5.
I'm going to answer your question on the next slide.
Black
It'll be
bar in
easier for
5
you. Yeah.
and the gray bar in 6.
If you go to your next slide, you're going to see your I lied. Oh, I can't do, we didn't get the data in the same way to do cohort data. So I think I'm going to be able to get it once the performance profiles come out, because they break the data down differently. So I would love to bring that back to you for the longitudinal. But you are correct. Gold would go to black in 4th grade and black would go to gray.
Oh, it's skipping 2 years.
Oh, skip 2 years.
5 and 6.
Yep.
3, 5, and 6, or 4, 6, and 7.
Yep.
And this is, the gray bar is the student's last year's grade.
Correct.
Because we take it so late to get it back, it's kind of an autopsy of that year, of what happened. So you have to you deal with it, but all those kids have moved into a different grade.
Formative assessment, it is not.
It is not a formative assessment. And that's where FAST and MAP helps us, because you're able to get a dipstick throughout the year 3 times in the year. So this is your math side of that. And we're seeing that math took a hit for a lot of our kids. And I think that Marty or Christy said it, that math is not easy to learn online, because that interaction, that ability to ask questions, and to get that immediate feedback is often needed. And then science, again, it's only taken in 5th, 8th, and 10th grade. And so that data we can't necessarily, I mean, you have to get creative on how you look at that, because fifth grade in 1819 and 1920 is sixth, 2021, and it goes, because it always skips.
Gold is gray.
Mhm. All right, so here's your student groups. One of our aims talks about looking at, go ahead and go to the next one. Those were our Paul Norton friends on a field trip. What you see here is our aim is to look at improving academic outcomes across all student groups. So here we're looking at our different student groups across the 3 areas. So this is our Black African American, and we're looking at percent proficient across ELA, math, and science. So again, these are not necessarily the same students, but they're that group that is going together. Elementary, we put in together because of the numbers. We don't have subgroups big enough to pull them apart, to break them down necessarily by grade level, so they're looked at as all together.
So I'm gonna make an assumption here, and you correct me if I'm inaccurate. Major discussions going on at the high school for how we are going to better serve our Black and African American students in math.
Yep.
And science.
And reading.
And reading.
Academically, periods. How?
Yep. And those are the questions I think we're having across the board.
Yeah.
I think when I bring our CFL data, you're going to see that same trend. We've got to dig deep on how are we not reaching them, what other things do we need to put in place. The status quo of what we've been doing isn't making the gains that we need to be, so we have to be reflective and work to see what those changes need to be. So your next group that you're going to look at is your Hispanic Latino, which is actually our largest student group that we have in terms of demographics. So when you look again across the board, they've played relatively steady. Science in 8th grade took a huge jump. 10th grade, the same, that we saw that same thing. And next we'll look at the white student group, just to see as for that comparison across the board, where they're at. And again, we see that dip again in math, which is very similar to what we saw on the map from this fall. And so that's something as we look at for the high school is where that is. I do think making sure that transition from 8th grade to 9th grade, that we're getting the data that we need in the hands of the right people is going to be critical to helping us get them in the right class. So then when we start to move to others, these are our special education students as we look across time. I always say with this, we have to remember part of being in special education is that we already know that you're below grade level. But the important thing I always think is we got to look at that growth that they're making. And with special ed, that gap can look very differently. I can be 1 grade level behind in math. I can be 3 grade levels. I can be much more than that. But I think part of that is remembering in our MTSS system that their SDI instruction in their goal area is in addition to the other interventions that they would be getting. It's not in place of. And that's a conversation that we've been having as we look at the tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. We have to not lose tier 2 interventions that we're doing because a student is now in special ed, and ensuring that they're getting all of that across the board. Dr. Morris, I can tell you have something to say.
Yeah, just, can you talk to them, because what's missing is an important student group that has been reported in the past in terms of our low socioeconomic status or free and reduced. So before Jamie jumps in, I want to give you some statistics that, Freehold, thank you, that we'll be sharing with our facility advisory committee because they asked for it. But in 2018-19, our district was approximately 16.7% of our students qualified for free and reduced or considered as a low SES student group. What we just certified this year for our student count, our October 1 count, 34.1%. and we think it is to a degree underreported. And so when you look at that and you look at these student groups, one of the things we're trying to tease out, but we were quite surprised by this year when we started pulling data, we're hoping it shows up in the school performance profiles that will be unembargoed tomorrow. None of us have gotten to preliminary look at the data, which has been a little frustrating this week. But if you dig into the research and the readings, trying to tease out that student group that's, you know, impacting or influencing some of this performance around, you know. So more to come as we dig in, and hopefully as data is unembargoed tomorrow, we'll have what we need. But I'm going to let Jamie finish to that point. But that's some interesting statistics as we were reflecting on data that the Facility Advisory Committee had asked us for.
Well, and the other thing you have to remember is a student can often fall into multiple of these groups. So they're, you know, they're showing up as special ed, and they're showing up in a demographic group. They're showing up in low SES. Last year when we brought this data to you, we were able to give you low SES, and I panicked because I couldn't figure out where we got the data last year for low SES and why I couldn't find it this year. And I went to every report you could possibly get in ISASP, and they created a really cool one now called a longitudinal one, which helps with a lot of this. And you can break it down into student groups. However, low SES is not on there, which surprises me. However, I figured out where we get the data from. We get the data from the Iowa School Performance profile that's going to come out tomorrow. And so I can bring that data back with me on November 14th. However, we didn't have access to that until it's released tomorrow. And it is not anywhere in ISASP unless we pulled the entire building and then tried to do our own sort. And so I will own, I chose to use my time otherwise and wait for the school performance profile to do that for me and go that direction. But that is, I think, a key group, because I think that a lot of our other groups are also falling into. So we have some dual things. So I talked to you about that alignment with the strategic plan. Our big thing as we look through this, these would be the three things I think that is the biggest focus of coming out of this data. That organizational coherence, I have to give credit to Marty and Rhonda for all their work in creating ways that we're collecting data the same way across the district. One of the things that we found is this school kind of collects it this way, this school kind of collects it this way, and then when you go to bring it together and really have those deep conversations, it takes you longer to figure out how to compare. And these two have spent countless hours putting together different types. So I would call it more of the longitudinal, where we have, I can find a kid and I can follow them through their whole history of elementary school. Our goal is once we get that going at the elementary, we can push that data up to the middle school. Now that they're using A-Read and A-Math, that data will be more meaningful to them and helping with that. Along with that, they've created an in-the-moment way of tracking those interventions. Because the problem is, in that transition period, if nobody lets you know the interventions you've already tried, what's already been done, then you end up repeating yourself. The student's frustrated because I've seen this before, I did this when I was in this grade. We're frustrated because we're not seeing the difference, and we have to get that organizational coherence where we're working together and making sure that we're meeting that. So our big part is just looking at how we're collecting that data, how do we get it into the hands of our teachers so they can use that in the moment. And then as a district, how do we decide at this level, where does that professional development need to be, and where do we need to look at what resources we need to get into the hands of teachers. Learning and achievement for all really speaks for itself. I mean, that's what we're all about. And that's what this data is telling us. Where are we at? What goals do we need to set, and where do we need to go? And then that priority 3 with that student accessibility as support is, we now know what we need to cover and where we need to get that extra help is, how do we give that support and ensure that students have that access. So that comes with our interventions. Bridges is a big thing. Since the day I walked into Armstrong, however many years ago, they said, we have nothing for math. We don't know what to do. How do we do this? We're trying to help, but we don't know. And it ends up that we're Googling things, and it isn't from lack of effort, but we hadn't put in their hands. So again, I can't thank the foundation enough, because we would have slowly gotten it into their hands, but we would have not been able to do it all at once to all buildings. And I mean, I've never seen a group, the AI sat right here, so excited when I said, you're gonna have more training. They were actually excited because it was over something that they had been asking for. And so we've got that set up, ready to start next week to work with that. In addition, that intervention is going to help our special ed students. And once we see how it works, there's going to be that ability to move that up to our middle school for those students that also need that help. And maybe that's not their specialty to go that low in terms of teaching, and we can put that resource into their hands. So with that being said, I'm going to leave you with High Five Friday from Grant Wood. Thanks to Jill and her photography skills. I want to thank you. I know this isn't always the most exciting thing to hear, but I do feel like our teachers are passionate about making the changes that need to be made. We're coming off some hard years. We're coming off some data that made us not feel so great about ourselves. But I think as you look there, we're seeing those jumps. We're seeing our students bounce back. And if we can celebrate that and build on that, great things are going to come. So I appreciate your time. Any more questions? The good news is I'm back on November 14th for a second part of this presentation. And at that time, we'll look at behavior data, end of the first quarter data, and then the things I wasn't able to show you tonight. Hopefully, tomorrow we'll be able to find on that website so I can bring that to you. So, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jamie.
Thank you, Jamie.
All right, brings us to 6.02 September financials.
I'll make a motion to approve 6.02, approve September financials as presented.
Second, anyone?
Second?
Hi, Bree.
Welcome, Bree. Welcome back.
Thank you. So Celeste, if you wouldn't mind going to the first statement there, thank you. So this is our,
Bree, hold on one second.
Oh,
Admin
yes.
team, go home. Go. You've got busy days. Chad, go celebrate
love and
what's
enjoy
left
you
of
all.
your
Go
50th.
home.
Happy birthday.
Dylan, you can go. Go study.
Study, go, scatter. I appreciate you guys being
Sorry,
here tonight. Yeah, and Bree, sorry, but
I'm trying not to take it personally, but it's fine.
it has nothing to do with you.
I know.
Thanks, Dylan.
Okay. So this, we did have a motion, right? I'm sorry, I got it.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All
Thank
you.
So this is our general fund, multiple year comparison. So you can see that our revenues are up 9.5%, expenditures are down 2.5%. The increase in revenue comes from property tax collection being up overall. And then we also have, of course, our federal reimbursements with ESSER dollars. So you can see the fiscal 22 and fiscal 23 will likely highlight some changes due to ESSER funding and ESSER expenditures throughout the year. I'll try and note when those happen so that the differences are easier to track. And then the decrease in our expenditures, again, our salaries and benefits are trending lower than in the prior year. We discussed that last month. And then the purchase services and the property line items are also down. Some of the purchase services, again, come from the ESSER purchases that we made at the beginning of last year. And then the property line item is largely cyclical. So depending on when we get materials, as we all have discussed, there are supply chain issues. So we continue to see those creeping through our financial statements. And then in the next piece, the supplementary statements. So you can see that in the management fund, there is what appears to be deficit spending. So we pay out our ongoing early retirement obligations around that October time period, and we had our July payment for this most recent year employees. So we'll see that increase again in October. And then the save fund, we're gonna really keep an eye on, although our revenue appears to be much higher than it was over the prior period, but that's because of the adjustments that the Department of Revenue is making on when they pay things out. So we'll just keep an eye on that, especially as our ongoing projects continue. But any other changes or discrepancies are all things that we've noted before and all things that we're tracking. Yes, sir.
And just refresh my memory.
Sure.
Whereas in the past, you got sort of 4 equal payments and then a reconciled final payment. Now it's what we got in the coffers or what we're sending out to the districts.
Exactly.
So we'll have a lot more.
Yes, fluctuation.
Quarter to quarter fluctuation.
Yes, absolutely. And the sales tax revenues are up significantly over the same period last year because the state, normally we would get what I call a true up payment. So I'm gonna try and be brief, I promise. They typically send out 95% of revenues in November. They true up the books, they close everything out from the prior fiscal, and then they disperse that to the districts. This year they did that early because they're moving to that more what I consider on-demand or on-time payment. So they did that in September, and you'll see an increase. If you looked up last September, you'd see an increase in revenues.
How is this change going to impact our budgeting projections?
Well, you have a masterful SBO. And a fantastic director of operations and a superintendent that likes long-range plans. I mean, tongue-in-cheek aside, we knew this was coming. We have monitored our projects, our obligations, any of those supply chain issues. So we're making sure that we've got the cash to fund those obligations. In the SAVE fund, it's mostly our payments for our bond, principal, and interest. And we do a monthly transfer for that obligation, which comes due in January and July. So those amounts are always front-loaded into the fund, and they're there and available.
And obviously, the economic situation means people could be concerned that the next quarter's payment could be less than the current quarter's. We've got the cash reserve to cover if we made commitments and then find ourselves a little disappointed.
Yes, and quite honestly, in the way that we have budgeted and the way that we've had this discussion with the board is the primary obligation for our sales tax fund right now is those bond payment. Yes, exactly. Anything above and beyond, we would monitor ahead of time and we would bring to the board when we have those capital planning conversations.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course, great question. If you want to go to the next one, Celeste, the general fund budget to actual. So our revenues are 7.3% above expected, and our expenses are 4.3% below what is expected. I did go back to a 3-year trend on this, even though we're gonna have some fluctuations because of ESSER and COVID. Those are all happening over that same 3-year period, so it's appropriate to have that model. The budget listed is the one that we certified with our aid and levy. Yes, sir, I see you, yes.
Yeah. Why do you prefer 3-year over 5 years?
Because of all the ups and downs, right now that 3-year SNP sort of equalizes what we're gonna see continue throughout this year. We still have ESSER money to spend, so you're gonna see increased revenues, you're gonna see increased expenses, and this sort of gives you more of that apples to apples. Typically, I would use a 5-year comparison, but with the way our funding lines up, it's more appropriate to use the 3-year for this budget cycle. So in our increases in the revenues, a majority of that again comes from the taxes and then interest. Pros and cons of increased interest rates. We are definitely earning more in our accounts, but there are also increased interest rates for borrowing. So that's a big part of the changes, and then the decreases in the other state sources, that's, again, just a timing issue of when we receive payments. In the expenditures, there's nothing significant to point out other than what we've already mentioned. A lot of the larger variances, for example, your business and central administration salaries are over 78–80% of our budget, and we know we've had some changes in staffing allocation and resources, so that's why you can see those differences and those decreases in that line item.
What percent did you say our staffing is?
Our staff, the business and central administration.
No, you
So-
said our salaries, but
Yeah, staffing is typically 78–80%. We're closer to 80% of our budget is spent on staff.
I heard you say 78, I'm like, need that low.
No, we're not.
Sorry.
That's the IASB recommended, 78–80%. We're 80. We're a solid 80. So yeah, you'll see those flowing through in those instructional and those different functional line items. And then the last statement is our cash and investment summary. Overall, we're up 5.8% from the same period last year. And then, like we said in August, that's mainly due to increases in our PEPL, food service, and self-insurance funds. I'm not gonna continue to say the same thing I've said. The differences are consistent in what we've discussed in prior months. And that's
Any
September.
questions?
Yes, all three statements presented, so we are a whole piece now, and you'll see these going forward.
Questions from the board? All right, hearing none, roll call.
Director Dorner?
Yes.
Director Eastman?
Yes.
Director Lynch?
Yes.
Director Fevich?
Yes.
Director Smithson?
Yes.
Director Castro?
Yes.
Director Champion?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bree.
Thanks, Bree.
Thank you, Bree.
All right, Kurt. Brings us to 6.03.
I move we approve the scope of work and proposed budget of $2,260,283 for the Neil Armstrong HVAC replacement.
Second.
Thank you.
Quite precise, down to the dollar.
I try to do what I can. So this is an ESSER funded project. Originally, the budget approved under ESSER was 1.8 million, but that was 2 years ago. And we all know what's happened in that 2 years. So we feel confident, whether it's other funding mechanisms, say PEPL, what have you, that we can still cover that additional cost. We'll certainly hope on bid day that maybe the engineer was just a little conservative on that, because some of their past projects we have done so far, they've been pretty conservative, so we've seen some better numbers. But it's the tile project is what it is. It's a HVAC replacement. So top to bottom, we're moving from electric VAV heat to a boiler system. So we're kind of going back to older technology, because that's what we know, that's what we can work on a lot easier. We spend, at one time, I think when I presented to the board, we showed we were spending $60,000 a year in energy there just on the electric side. So the boiler system will be a lot more energy efficient. The water system carries that a lot better than what electricity does. So.
And on your presentation, as I recall, we were spending almost double, like per square foot.
Per compared to other elementary
Compared to the
schools,
other
yeah.
elementaries.
Yeah.
So this is an investment that will reap dividends.
Yeah. Yeah, Bree and I and Dr. Morse have always said, you know, we should be spending PEPL and save dollars to try to ease our general fund burdens, and so that's definitely a major piece of that, for sure.
Excellent. Any questions for Kurt? I know we've talked about it multiple times, so. No, hearing none, roll call.
Director Eastman?
Yes.
Director Lynch?
Yes.
Director Fevich?
Yes.
Director Smithson?
Yes.
Director Castro?
Yes.
Director Champion?
Yes.
Director Dorner?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Thanks,
you all.
Kurt.
Thanks, Kurt.
Make sure you buy electric cars.
All right, that brings us to 6.04. We are continuing the discussion on board policy 213.
I could start us off. I don't have a particular plan. I just want to share the reflections I've had since our last discussion. And I did spend some time reflecting on it. As I recall the last discussion, there were sort of a couple of key questions. One was sort of, do we align practice with policy, or policy with practice, in particular on the question of, do you have to sign up in advance? Having reflected on what we talked about, I feel quite comfortable aligning policy to practice and allowing people to approach without having pre-scheduled. So I would support aligning policy with practice on that question. There was a second question that we talked about, sort of, where does this go in our agenda? I remain open to experimentation. I don't feel like it has to be at the beginning. I think it was very good that we let the cell kids go before that, and if it needed to be elsewhere in the agenda, perhaps not in the middle, because we decided that was a bad idea, I'd be willing to at least experiment a little bit and see where it falls. The new piece I have coming out of our conversations that we didn't talk about is it struck me that part of our problem might be the situation we're in wasn't really anticipated by this policy. We've been in a situation where a number of people have chosen to come and speak to us at virtually every meeting. And I think the policy was designed for people who would come and I have one thing I need to share, they share it, we hear it, and they've done their piece. This new element of repeated speaking might require some more contemplation. I don't have answers, but I think it's an issue that the policy doesn't anticipate and might need further clarification. And just, this is merely hypothetical, but I certainly know, sitting at this table, it is inappropriate for me to campaign from the table. And it seems like it's equally inappropriate to give candidates sort of 3 minutes of time whenever you want it to campaign from the podium. And that might be something we want to think about, how do we handle. I don't know the answer, but that's the concern that I sort of feel the policy as is doesn't address, that might be part of why we need to talk about it.
Anyone else want to add to that conversation?
I'll just quickly, I would say, I think we should have a policy that reflects what we're doing. I don't believe we should become so rigid that a form has to be submitted before 6 p.m. I just don't think that's possible for everybody. I think tonight, when we were talking about agenda planning, it was very clear to me, like, the cell group needed to go first. They have finals. To me, that was a no-brainer to move them to the beginning of the meeting. Probably is what I've kind of finalized my thoughts on is we need to provide that as close to the beginning as possible. Like tonight we had an exception, we had students here and that worked well. What I would maybe like to see is that so that we can carry on business and staff can get out of here, and it so rarely happens that it exceeds a half hour. I think tonight was, I think I looked down, it was 12 minutes or something. You know, do we just put like a half-hour time cap from when it starts to it ends? And if there's something of notoriety in the district, that we could extend that. But I would like to maybe see us look at maybe doing a half-hour cap, so that way when we're doing agenda planning, we can have some structure to the meeting and know how long we're gonna be here. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you for that. Anyone else like to add?
I remember there were 3 specific instances when we met in the PAC, Performing Arts Center. The 3 instances where we're thinking about closing a building, the mask issue, and closing a building, a masking issue, and right here in this boardroom with issues in middle school. I went back and looked at some of my notes about closing a building and masking. I think they were in the mid-20s. And we allowed those people talk, and we didn't, because it was very contentious and emotional at that time, so we let them talk. So I really don't I agree with Andrew and Richard that we shouldn't be locked into having them have to have a sheet of paper in before the meeting starts. I totally agree with that. I think we looked at the other 2 policies from some adjoining districts, and I think those were both at the beginning. The participation was at the beginning of the meeting. And Richard, just for clarity, I didn't understand when you were talking about campaigning. What does that mean? What were you referring to?
Well, just when it's school board election season, we need to be conscientious that we're not sort of trying to campaign from the table. And
Or you
keep our
mean
candidate
candidates
separate from our role serving as a board member. And we need to be sort of respectful of that, and we all have to.
Likewise at the podium. I mean, we've had people come to the podium and flat out state that they were campaigning. I mean, we have had that happen.
That's just sort of, as I was reflecting, it's like, so what's the problem? So I think it sounds to me like this sort of generally 30-minute max, but in exceptional cases, we make exceptions, seems like a good rule of thumb to me.
And I think if things kind of keep progressing the way we're progressing, I think we might find there may be fewer people speaking for less and less time.
That's ideal. I mean, that we don't have problems that people need to speak about is ideal. That's the point.
I mean, I just want to say, and it's right in our policy, that our public, I know that they're used to coming and speaking, right? And we do have this policy, but we are not required to let them speak at all. So, I mean, I think we've been very generous. The law does not say that they can't, that they have a right to come and participate. They are definitely able to come and view, right? But our job at the board table is to do the business of the board. There are lots of other ways for people to contact the board and get their points across as well. And I think that sometimes people don't use those and think that they have to come to a meeting. If we are moving to aligning our policy with practice, then we need to do some work on our policy. Because like I said, our policy says they have to sign ahead of time. It doesn't say how far ahead of time, and if you look at the policies that we looked at from the other districts, one just has a raise your hand thing, but the other districts around us say you have to have it just turned in by the time the pledge is spoken at 6 o'clock. So I guess I hear a couple people saying they're fine with aligning the policy to the practice. I haven't really heard from everyone. So Dr. Peevich, what do you think?
I agree with exactly what Andrew said, and I would just expound on the fact I would apply the policy to the current practice. And I apologize for my sultry voice. But I would also like to remind everybody sitting here that we were elected by this public. And this public can contact us via email and things, but then their voice is not heard at the podium by the public during an email like it is when they come to the podium. And so I think it is our job to kind of hear what they have to say, to get the feel of the room, just in case this person was going to email just one person and not the whole board, and to have the public hear it. I think that's what we sit here for, is to represent this community. We are the board of the district, but we represent the people of this community, and they've elected us. And I think we have the right to hear what they have to say. I would not sway from moving from the beginning of the meeting, with the exception of something like what we had tonight. I think that that's very reasonable, and I would keep it within, put it before the consent agenda. Anything else can fall where it may, whatever, but keep it before the consent agenda. But I would not limit. I mean, I don't care if you do a half an hour. I don't think you're ever going to run into that. You're going to run into that maybe once a year, where it's going to be more than a half an hour. And so I don't have a problem putting a cap on it, because you can always lift that if you want to. But if there's some contentious, topic, but I wouldn't limit them, and I'd keep it at the beginning, and not, because right now it'd be after 9 o'clock when they're going to be able to get up to the podium, and if you put it at the end, I just think that's wrong. So.
My primary concern, and the reason that I really wanted to have this discussion, is just to make sure that we have a policy in place that we follow. So whatever those changes need to be to the policy, and ensure that we're following it, I feel good about, but we need to make sure that we align the policy with the practice.
Agreed.
So whether that is, even tonight I tried to give a reminder, hey, if you're going to speak, please make sure that you hand that form over. Celeste, I apologize, I saw you still had to chase a few of them down. So whatever we can do to get the community to just fill out that form and hand it over, or even bring it up to the podium and make a stack, whatever that needs to look like. That way we have proper minutes is the primary concern, making sure that we're submitting accurate information at the end of our meetings, and that we're following policy. And thus far, we have been choosing to not follow our policy. So that is my primary concern. Let's make the changes so that we are following board policy.
I mean, I would imagine that anyone who is coming to the podium to speak and values the public participation and recognizes that we have a responsibility to our community to provide accurate records, I can't understand why anyone would have a problem filling out that form, as it is part of what we are expected to provide to our community. So I like the idea of continuing to document who is coming, especially since we still have people who come every time and speak, and yet they don't always remember to say their name and their address, and sometimes it's not very clear for calling to hear, or so I just think that would be a nice practice to continue. I like the idea of a time cap, and if there are additional folks wanting to speak, we can always afford them at the end of the meeting. One thing I would like us to address is the number of times that we allow the same person to come up and speak in a given board meeting. If your limit is 3 minutes, I think that's an overall limit, or maybe one time to the podium, because we've had instances where people will continue, come up multiple times in a meeting, and just out of fairness, I think would be a fair way to approach it, one time per meeting.
While we're tweaking some of the details, and I see notes are getting taken, thank you. I don't know that we need to require people to state their address, their street address, when they come up to the podium. They should state their name.
It's in Iowa code, I'm pretty sure.
Well, in that case, we need to require it, but if it's not required by Iowa code, I would rather not require people to do that.
I almost thought there was.
Then I think they absolutely have to fill out the form.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree. The form is the record, they write it down, but they don't need to say it unless law requires it.
In addition, I'm pretty sure it's code, but in addition to that, in our public records, we need to have that information because there have been lots of instances, not here yet, of people coming to school board meetings and speaking publicly, and they are not members of that community at all whatsoever. And I feel like we have to have a very solid record of who is coming to speak at our meetings.
Well, and in light of some impersonation things that have been taking place within our community via phone calls and things like that, I mean, we need to make sure that the people that are coming forward are from our community and represent our taxpayers and the community that we're serving. And we have most definitely had situations where impersonations have been taking place and then posted on the internet.
Yeah, we just need to make sure that, that we have that accurate record.
Absolutely. Anything else that we would like to add?
So I just want to make sure I understand.
Okay.
Check for understanding, so that we can bring back a proposed draft of this for next meeting. I am hearing that it will stay at the start of the meeting. I am hearing that they need to complete the form in its entirety, not necessarily before the start of the meeting, but as they come up to speak, they need to either leave it at the podium or present it to our board secretary, Colleen, or even Celeste.
And ideally, it should really go to Colleen. Yeah. Yeah.
It should.
Celeste, I think we're gonna permanently remove you from the situation. You have enough going on there.
I mean, I think we should be specific.
Yes,
If we're gonna
so
say
we-
it needs to be completed
Yes.
before you speak, it needs to be given to her. I think
Yes.
there's a,
No, I'll make sure that
Yeah.
there's clear
I don't think
directions
it's turned
delivered.
in, if they can hand it over.
Just needs to be turned in,
Yeah,
Just
right?
turned in.
But I don't want Colleen, or I don't want either of them to have to chase people
Some
down.
people don't speak until the form's done.
No, it's 100%.
It's-
We just need to streamline the process. Leave them up there would be great.
Yeah.
And I think that the community would have no problem with that. They're completely capable.
Could we station you here for the public comment section so that they don't have to leave it there or somebody could take them? I think that they would just need to be right there. Make that a little bit easier, not to trek across to hand it over.
And we could also draw the directors down a row, and Colleen could be positioned at the end of the table, because we've also talked about the fact that David should be at the table. We could draw directors down
It's
one
kinda
more.
renewed since COVID.
I
And
like my chair.
you can keep your chair, you just
you
gotta
keep
move
your
it down a
chair.
little.
But I think that if we just restructure it that way,
Or we
then
could just mix everybody up again.
Ooh.
yes, which that
Let's not get too
that
radical.
recommendation has been made.
Just seeing if
Changes
people
are
are
still awake at 9 o'clock.
Was that something you'd be comfortable with?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
form completed prior to speaking, as they come up to speak, hand to board secretary. I'm hearing
And we'll wait for you if you need to fill it out.
And I think bringing
There's
Colleen
no
back to the
comments.
table might help too, just with roll calls and stuff and that eye contact, just instead of voice.
And then I'm
Yeah.
hearing, some language in the policy around speaking one time per meeting, and a time limit overall for public comment to be 30 minutes. If it should exceed that, they would have the opportunity to speak at the end of the meeting.
Only if that's.
No, I know, that's what I'm hearing, to bring back, so we can draft some language around some of these
I
recommendations.
wouldn't make it then, I would just extend it. If it's some hot topic, I wouldn't make it go to the end. I wouldn't do a half hour first, then go to the end of the meeting.
well, and our practice has been if there is a hot topic, if
We're holding a
we're
meeting.
holding a forum, really.
Understand, but this is gonna apply to the forum too, so I
Well-
wouldn't just keep it at half.
How do we decide if it's a hot topic? Because we have had instances.
You can't
Based
put
on the
every- you can't
number
put
of
everything
emails
in
I'm
there.
receiving.
Okay, but honestly,
You'll know it when it
Let's
happens.
not, I don't wanna overthink it.
Yeah,
I
you
really
can't put
don't wanna
everything in
overthink it.
policy.
Motion to extend and blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah, it gets
so
messy
if
quickly.
we hit
Oh, 'cause you would
30
have to
minutes
create
and
the
people still wanna
agenda.
come up, we automatically extend it?
Not necessarily, I
No.
mean,
Maybe we just don't, we just leave it at
If
30
there's
minutes.
business to be done that night.
And that could be,
because
it
we
could
do,
be.
our
So
primary
we know,
function is the
we know a lot of
business.
people wanna speak.
Yeah.
The 30 minutes is tonight, but next time we will
So, and let me-
arrange for this opportunity for
probably
you to be
shouldn't
heard.
butt in, but I'm going to.
That's fine, that's right.
If I think this through as I'm listening, if, around the 30-minute, never mind, I'll process it and bring it back
Well,
next time
I have
in a
one more
draft
question
policy.
about that
Yeah.
30 minutes. Are we setting aside 30 minutes every single time and gonna just wait in case someone
No.
comes late?
No.
It won't exceed.
No,
What
'cause
I'm
today-
hearing was it would not exceed 30
Correct.
minutes. Is that
Correct.
If
accurate?
there's one person, it's 3 minutes. If
Yeah.
there's nobody, we
I
don't
just wanna
sit for half an hour.
make that clear, because if we don't make it very clear, it could sound like we're setting aside the first 30 minutes of the meeting for anyone to come and speak, and
clearly
then
not
if we
past
move on, well,
No.
right, but we have to be careful
To
when
not
we're wording
exceed.
it.
To not exceed.
Okay.
And I
Just
would
wanna make
still
sure.
like to see us make the effort, like today, if we know we have a student group coming in, let's prioritize them, and I think our community
problem.
fully supports that.
No
I don't
problem.
think they have any
Yes, no
concern
problem
with
with
that.
That's common sense.
Yeah.
And then,
Don't put Jamie first.
Jamie, he said that with love.
You saved the best for last.
He said that with love, I could
You're
tell.
the dessert of the meeting.
That's what you meant to say.
Well, you weren't technically.
Maybe we
And then
should
he
put a
can't wait for the
30-minute limit on
14th.
Jamie's presentations.
You're probably gonna wanna come early, Dr. Peavy, on the 14th, I know.
they will do some research to determine.
I am 90% sure that it is not required in the law that they announce their name and address.
Address is
I-
fine.
Well, I think that the concern that I'm hearing is some people have concerns about saying it aloud.
I'm fine with that, but they need to record it in some way, and they
Yes.
do need to put, I think they do need to say their name.
Oh, yes, I agree with you
They
on both counts.
absolutely
They
need to
need
say
to
their
record it
name.
and tell us their address. And they
Address
need to state their name
has to be on the
publicly.
form at least.
But-
I mean,
but I
I'm
think
fine
some
with
people
that, but,
won't speak because they don't wanna say their address.
right. And
And I don't want that to be a barrier for someone
Right,
to speak.
that's why I'm
either.
asking that we take that out.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but it has to be on the form, and the form has to be filled out before you speak.
And I agree
Because we
with
do
both of
have
those.
to have record of it, I mean, that
I'm good with that.
only makes sense, and, yeah.
Okay.
Just one slight little question to add on to this. We put in at the end of the statement about slander and libel. You know, we didn't vote, there was no discussion at the table about that, so.
No, that was my decision upon recommendations by the board's legal counsel.
Okay, and then just losing follow-up, slander and libel, I mean, if somebody believes what they're saying is true, and it is true, is that slander or libel?
If they believe it's true,
Yeah, and it is true.
if it is true.
Then it's
A
neither
true-
slander
yeah,
nor
truth is,
libel.
yeah, truth is a defense, always.
Sure.
Truth.
Okay.
But if it's not true and they think it is,
That is not a defense.
gotcha.
Depends if they write it or say it, if it's slander or not.
Right, exactly.
And that's the difference between the two? Okay.
Mhm.
Alright.
And Paul, just so you know a little bit of background, there are current lawsuits taking place on that very thing in the state of Iowa.
Well, I mean, that's
So,
fine, that's fine.
Yeah.
But in regards to your question, Director Castro, I would hope that the first time we hear about a concern is not here.
Right.
Well,
We
yeah,
have board policy that talks about resolving concerns, complaints, questions at the lowest level possible. There isn't a building administrator in this district nor a director that isn't willing to take the time to have the conversations. And so at times, the first time we as an administrative team hear about stuff is here, where I think we could prevent a lot of the concern or anxiety that comes with that concern. And so again, I would encourage our community to have those conversations, bring those concerns to the building administration, even the teacher. I mean, if we talk about following practice to our board policy that you all put into place talks about trying to get those resolved to the lowest level possible. If it's not being addressed, then obviously continuing to go up. But I would hope our community feels that they can come and talk with an administrator or a teacher to begin getting their concerns addressed.
Well, we have been having lots of conversations about that very thing in our board workshops, about encouraging our community to follow that chain of command. Start with the teacher. If you have a concern, you should go to the teacher first. And if that's not being addressed, then this is the way it goes.
And often the topics that are brought forward at the podium, which is their opportunity to speak at the board, not speak with the board, but speak at the board, are not areas of concern of which the board is supposed to be handling. We have a very narrow scope of what we handle. So often those pieces are not areas of which we should be frankly interfering with. It would be completely out of our lane to interfere or interject ourselves into those situations.
I don't think we would interfere, we just, they have the chance to speak their piece.
Right.
They also don't understand that. There are
No, I
people
know.
out there that think I can fire a lunch lady.
Yeah, I know,
You know,
I know,
they don't-
and
they don't,
educating the community is a huge piece, but it's not our lane, and then I always have that fear of that somebody's going to provide information, then will bias us in a quasi judicial situation,
Yeah.
and then we don't have a quorum that can make a decision because they've brought forward information that we should not have. And that is always a huge concern of mine, because I do not believe that the community completely understands the very small scope of which we work. So we need to do a better job of educating and encouraging the community to first attempt to resolve things at the lowest level and then work its way up. I in no way want to prevent our community from speaking at us. So our hope is to bring forward a draft
Updated draft of this policy.
for November 14th.
All right.
Or
So next.
after. I mean, we have a lot
I mean,
going.
it's still
It needs to hold off a meeting.
Yeah, I,
Yeah.
I think the next
the
meeting's
hope
gonna be
is
long.
November 14th. If it doesn't happen, that's okay. The community will be able to continue to come and speak at us.
We will maintain our policy practice.
We will
gap
continue to
until
not
we
follow
fix
policy.
it.
I was just gonna ask for clarification.
For clarification,
We'll keep the
from what
status
I'm
quo.
hearing, we will not follow policy.
Let's go.
The more you do that, the slower I want to go. Okay, 7.01, upcoming calendar items. Please note that October 27th is canceled. You guys will be at a very important training. And then the next board meeting will be on a Monday, so we can attend IASB. So please make note of those changes. And then we have our next board development workshop on the 5th.
Is that a Monday?
Yes.
I know. No, it's fine. I'll just be here as soon as I can.
All right, that brings us to 8.01.
I move that we go into closed session pursuant to Iowa Code 21.5(1)(c), which allows for a closed session to discuss strategy with counsel in matters that are presently in litigation or where litigation is imminent, where its disclosure would be likely to prejudice or disadvantage the position of the governmental body in that litigation.
I'll second that, sorry.
Roll call.
Director Lynch.
Yes.
Director Keepich.
Yeah.
Director Smithson.
Yes.
Director
Yep.
Castro.